Chapter 5761. Yes. Kong Shinmu didn't refuse. Although he felt that Wanzong's words were strange, he couldn't help but remember what Wanzong had said. He said that the master of the Tianyuan Palace was best friends with Feng. Of course, there was also the matter of the ancestors of the dragon gods. Tang Xiaoyu also returned to the Tianyuan Palace. In terms of strength, Lian Zhu and Tang Xiaoyu were on par. Whether they could catch Tang Xiaoyu depended on their attainments in the nature-essence superposition technique. The outside world knew that Tang Xiaoyu was ignorant and incompetent. His comprehension of his sex manifestation origin stacking technique was a complete mess. Only those who had fought with Tang Xiaoyu knew that his nature-essence superposition technique was very strong. Moreover, his manifestation origin stacking technique allowed him to adapt to the situation and deal with all kinds of situations calmly. It was not limited to a single spell technique. Now that Tang Xiaoyu had appeared in the Tianyuan Palace, the disciples were no longer surprised. Lian Yi had gone out and hadn't returned yet. Lian Zhu had temporarily replaced Lian Yi's position and was in charge of some trivial matters in the Tianyuan Palace. Currently, there were people from other sects visiting the Tianyuan Palace. They were from the Shao Yun sect, the Qing sect, and the Wuji Pavilion. It was because of the crack that had suddenly appeared in the world boundary. The elders speculated that it was because the secret realm had suddenly collapsed, causing a crack to appear in the southern part of the outer region. The crack was relatively close to the cities under the jurisdiction of the Tianyuan Palace and Shangzhou City. Thus, Shangzhou City had also sent people over. It had happened so suddenly that the elders had arranged a meeting. The crack was still small, not enough for one person to pass through. But the aura of the spatial storm from the crack was getting stronger and stronger. Moreover, it was clearly mixed with the aura of the other world. That included the aura of the other world. The other world's foundation was very terrifying. The outer region, even the Feng region, couldn't underestimate the other world. The first person to discover the crack was Elder Nangong Fengyu of the Wuji Pavilion. She had discovered it by chance on the way back to the Wuji Pavilion with Nangong Yi. The two of them temporarily cast a spell to seal the crack, but it was only a temporary seal. There were still spatial storms blowing out from it. Fortunately, the terrain was more remote, so no one would be sucked in. But this wasn't a long-term solution. The strength of the spatial storm was not something an ordinary supreme cultivator could withstand. In addition, that crack seemed to be expanding. Given time, it would sooner or later affect Upper Continent City, and even the entire Heavenly Origin Palace's subsidiary cities. In the end, it would affect the entire outer realm. Hence, Nangong Fengyu came to the Heavenly Yuan Palace to discuss how to resolve this matter. Tang Xiaoyu did not expect Heavenly Yuan Palace to be so lively. He directly asked Lian Zhu to bring Kong Shinmu to find the palace lord or arrange a place for him to stay. Tang Xiaoyu? How dare you come back? On the way, the three of them were stopped. They were from other sections. I am a disciple of Heavenly Yuan Palace. If I don't come here, where should I go? Tang Xiaoyu raised his eyebrows as he casually swept his gaze over the guests in front of him. Not far away, the great elders finished their discussion. As for the matter of the crack in the boundary of the world, they were prepared to work together to repair it. The general of Shangzhou City had already contacted the city lord. It was time for the elders to return and prepare for the repairs. Kong Shinmu. From afar, Elder Nangong Fengyu of the Everlasting Pavilion saw Kong Shinmu and shouted coldly. Not long ago, he had received a summons. He originally planned to capture Kong Shinmu after the meeting, but he did not expect to see Kong Shinmu here. It was truly unexpected. Nangong Fengyu's figure flashed and appeared beside Kong Shinmu. Elder Nangong. Tang Xiaoyu shouted loudly. Not only did his shout not stop Nangong Fengyu, but he was also stopped by Nangong Fengyu's words. Who do you think you are? The dignified Elder Nangong of the Everlasting Pavilion is usually like this? Tang Xiaoyu was not afraid of Nangong Fengyu. Wasn't it just because he had the Nangong family behind him? As a hidden family, the Nangong family could not be bothered with these trivial matters. How I do is not up to you to point your finger at me, Nangong Fengyu said as she pointed at Tang Xiaoyu. Tang Xiaoyu, are you crazy? Lian Zhu was clear of Nangong Fengyu's strength. If this attack landed, Tang Xiaoyu would definitely be seriously injured. The crazy one is Nangong Fengyu, right? No wonder that crazy woman is so unreasonable. Even the elders in the family are like this. What kind of disciples can you expect from them? Tang Xiaoyu sneered and did not move at all. He was not afraid of Nangong Fengyu's attack. Elder Nangong, this junior was rude. Lian Ju respectfully apologized to Nangong Fengyu. Nangong Fengyu retracted her hand this time. Wait for me to take care of that thief. Then I will deal with you. Nangong Fengyu's gaze fell on Kong Shinmu once again. That pair of sinister eyes was filled with dense killing intent. It was as if she wanted to tear Kong Shinmu into pieces. Thus, Nangong Fengyu did not hold back when dealing with Kong Shinmu. She immediately released her 9th-level divine power. In an instant, a glass-like barrier suddenly spread out and gathered towards Kong Shinmu. Jiang Shenwu could clearly feel the suppression of a cultivation realm suddenly assaulting him. However, this suppression only lasted for a breath's time before it disappeared. Kong Shinmu looked up and saw a white-haired old man dressed in a white robe walking over with his hands behind his back. Elder Nangong. The moment the person spoke, all the suppression released by Nangong Fengyu was dispelled. Greetings, Palace Master. All the Heavenly Yuan Palace disciples bowed in unison. Kong Shinmu also cupped his fists and bowed. Tian Xingyi, do you know who this person is? Nangong Fengyu turned her head and looked at the Heavenly Yuan Palace Master. Her tone was filled with hostility. I heard you call him Kong Shinmu just now. That should be Kong Shinmu, right? Tian Xingyi smiled. That's right. This person's name is Kong Shinmu. Nangong Fengyu raised her eyebrows and said gloomily, he killed several elite disciples of my limitless pavilion and did not even let the pavilion master's daughter off. This person should be executed. Is that true? Tian Xingyi heard this and glanced at Kong Shinmu. At the same time, Kong Shinmu felt an extreme yang energy suddenly sweeping over. This was probably the energy of the Heavenly Yuan Palace Master, Tian Xingyi. Kong Shinmu restrained his aura so that he would not clash with this energy. Tian Xingyi also restrained his aura very quickly. The disciples who went to the sealed secret territory are all eyewitnesses. They can all prove that he killed countless disciples. Nangong Fengyu's face was extremely gloomy. The powerful divine energy that was released from her body was closing in on Kong Shinmu. So, you are targeting Kong Shinmu because of your family? Tian Xingyi stroked his beard and said. Chapter 5762. Of course not. Tian Xingyi stroked his beard and smiled. Palace Master, please hand him over. Nangong Fengyu's eyes darkened. Not only were there people from Tianyuan Palace, but there were also guests from other sections. Most of them were here because of the abnormal crack that had appeared at the world boundary. They were also influential people from various sections. It was surprising that something like this had happened between Tianyuan Palace and Wuji Pavilion. Of course, they did not know the whole picture and did not comment. They just maintained an objective attitude from afar. Elder Nangong is right. Tian Xingyi nodded. But, suddenly he changed the topic. This is Tianyuan Palace. Elder Nangong should know the rules of Tianyuan Palace, right? Nangong Fengyu did not want to listen to any reasoning at all. In his opinion, anyone who stopped him from capturing Kong Shinmu was declaring war on Wuji Pavilion. There had already been some friction with Tianyuan Palace because of the alliance. Now that Tian Xingyi had done this, it was very thought-provoking. I know the rules of Tianyuan Palace, but you know that this person is wanted by Wuji Pavilion. Can you give me an explanation? Nangong Fengyu was already circulating his supreme divine power as he spoke. It was as though he would start a fight if there was any disagreement. This was Nangong Fengyu's confidence in Wuji Pavilion. Once they started a war, Wuji Pavilion would not fear Tianyuan Palace at all. This brother is a guest of Tianyuan Palace and he is now in Tianyuan Palace. If you take him away from Tianyuan Palace, how will the world look at Tianyuan Palace? Tian Xingyi said unhurriedly. Then who would dare to come to Tianyuan Palace? Tian Xingyi's words made sense. All the guests of Tianyuan Palace agreed with Tian Xingyi's words. To think that you still know this. Nangong Fengyu sneered coldly. Tianyuan Palace knows that Kong Shinmu is wanted by Wuji Pavilion, but you still insist on protecting him. If this gets out, won't Tianyuan Palace become a place that deliberately protects criminals? Nangong Fengyu's gaze landed on Tang Xiaoyu after she finished speaking. As a wanted criminal of the Heavenly Yuan Palace, not only did Tang Xiaoyu appear to be in good spirits, but he was also safe and sound in the Heavenly Yuan Palace. Is this how your Heavenly Yuan Palace does things? Nangong Fengyu questioned in a clear voice. Elder Nangong, if you want to talk about your Wuji Pavilion, just say it. Why do you keep looking at me? Could it be that I'm a long-lost clansman of your Nangong family? Tang Xiaoyu looked at Nangong Fengyu innocently. If that's the case, then I'll have to trouble Elder Nangong to find a suitable time to pass on the power of the Nangong clan's bloodline. Impudent! Nangong Fengyu shouted coldly. With a wave of his sleeve, a white waterfall swept out and headed straight for Tang Xiaoyu. Elder Nangong, is this how you treat your Nangong family members? If this were to spread out, wouldn't it damage the reputation of your Nangong family? Tang Xiaoyu executed the myriad elephant origin superposition technique and easily dodged Nangong Fengyu's attack. When Tian Xingyi saw this, his murky eyes lit up. After not seeing him for a period of time, this kid's myriad elephant origin superposition technique had become even more exquisite. Kong Xinmu also broke out in cold sweat and was about to make a move. Tang Xiaoyu naturally saw through Kong Xinmu's thoughts. Under such circumstances, Kong Xinmu definitely couldn't make a move. Otherwise, he would only become a laughingstock for Nangong Fengyu. Our Nangong family doesn't have a clansman like you. Nangong Fengyu emphasized coldly. All the clansmen of the Nangong family have the surname Nangong. If I remember correctly, your name is Tang Xiaoyu. Elder Nangong actually remembers this junior's name. I'm really flattered, Tang Xiaoyu said with a mischievous smile. However, there's something this junior has to remind Elder Nangong. Elder Nangong is wrong when you said that all the clansmen of the Nangong family have the surname Nangong. After all, Gu Feng's surname is Gu. Nangong Fengyu's face darkened. Tang Xiaoyu. Tian Xingyi stopped Tang Xiaoyu. Tang Xiaoyu tactfully retreated to the side. Tian Xingyi, do you really want to protect Kong Xinmu? Nangong Fengyu's words were filled with the smell of gunpowder. She wasn't polite at all and directly called Tian Xingyi by his real name. Kong Xinmu is a guest of our Heavenly Yuan Palace. During his stay, we definitely won't hand him over to you. Tian Xingyi said firmly. Very well. Nangong Fengyu was so angry that she laughed. She flung her sleeves and strode out of Heavenly Yuan Palace. Someone send Elder Nangong out. Tian Xingyi called out. No need. After Nangong Fengyu left, the guests from the other sects also bid farewell to Heavenly Yuan Palace. Tian Xingyi was about to bring Kong Xinmu to the Forbidden Grounds when he was stopped by Tang Xiaoyu. Palace Lord, you can't be muddle-headed. Do I look like that kind of person to you? Tian Xingyi raised his brows. Lian Yi, capture Tang Xiaoyu. Lian Yi had been waiting at the side for a long time. When he heard Tian Xingyi's order, he immediately came over and tied up Tang Xiaoyu. Palace Lord, I've said it many times. I really didn't mean to barge into the Forbidden Grounds. Moreover, there's nothing to take inside. When Tang Xiaoyu opened his mouth, the people from Heavenly Yuan Palace felt a sharp pain in their heads. He was really too talkative. In just a short while, he had already said a lot. Tian Xingyi was annoyed listening to him and couldn't help but frown. Only Lian Yi was expressionless. Eldest senior brother Lian Yi was probably the only person in the entire Heavenly Yuan Palace who could endure Tang Xiaoyu's nagging. All right, there's no need to tie him up. Tian Xingyi waved his hand helplessly. Then, he ignored Tang Xiaoyu and let him be. Tian Xingyi brought Kong Xinmu into the Forbidden Grounds of Heavenly Yuan Palace. The moment he stepped into the Forbidden Grounds, Kong Xinmu felt a strange feeling coming from the chi meridians in his body. The most obvious feeling came from the engraving of the 7 devouring demon sealing art. Ever since he absorbed the power from the explosion of Feng's secret realm, the engraving of the 7 devouring demon sealing art had completely transformed into 2 forms, yin and yang, which was the bipolar mirror. At this moment, the bipolar mirror opened automatically. The power in the chi meridians moved on its own, attacking the consciousness of his soul. The consciousness of his soul that had always been calm also started to churn. With the churning of the consciousness of his soul, Kong Xinmu felt that his soul and consciousness were gradually becoming stronger. What kind of power was in this forbidden ground? Kong Shinmu couldn't help but be curious. He had heard Tang Xiaoyu mention the ancestors of the dragon gods before. He didn't know if it was because of the ancestors' power that caused his power to react like this. But thinking about it, the abnormality in the Qi meridian should correspond to the power of the ancestors. Then what about the engraving of the 7 devouring demon sealing art? Could there still be remnants of Feng's power here? Kong Shinmu, you are a member of the dragon gods, right? Chapter 5763. Kong Shinmu hesitated as he looked at the misty passageway. This was his first official visit to the Heavenly Yuan Palace. How did he get brought to the forbidden area? Senior, I am a member of the Dragon God clan. My name is Kong Shinmu, Kong Shinmu answered honestly. Please come in. Tian Xingyi smiled and gestured for Kong Shinmu to enter the passageway. As if he knew Kong Shinmu's concerns, Tian Xingyi smiled. Little friend, do I look like an unreasonable person to you? Kong Shinmu bowed. He knew this, but he was confused. He had just arrived at the Heavenly Yuan Palace. Why was he invited to the forbidden area? Big senior brother, just let me take a look around. Behind him, Tang Xiaoyu's resentful voice came. Immediately, Tang Xiaoyu's figure appeared. After a breath's time, Lian Yi's figure appeared. Tang Xiaoyu, how many times have I told you? You have to cultivate the 10,000 elephants origin folding technique. Don't skip levels. Lian Yi emphasized. Anyone who understood the manifestation origin superimposition technique would be able to tell at a glance how Tang Xiaoyu used the manifestation origin superimposition technique. This guy obviously did not cultivate according to the conventional method. This method allowed one to improve quickly, but it also had serious drawbacks. There was a high chance that it would backfire. Right now, his realm was still low, so he might not notice anything. When his cultivation was higher, he would know the drawbacks. Big senior brother, I understand. I will change next time. Tang Xiaoyu came to the entrance of the passageway. With just a glance, he knew the route. He told Kong Shinmu the route in detail. He also told Kong Shinmu where he could meet the ancestor of the Dragon God clan. Tian Xingyi and Lian Yi were dumbfounded by what they saw. Brother Jiang, don't worry and go in. If there is any danger, please call me. The palace master will not leave you in the lurch. Thank you. Kong Shinmu thanked him and stepped into the passageway. As soon as they entered, the gate of the Forbidden Land closed. Young Master Jiang, don't worry. If you are in danger in Heavenly Yuan Palace, it will definitely be because of Tang Xiaoyu. Kong Shinmu hadn't even taken a few steps when he heard Lian Yi's voice coming from behind him. He couldn't help but laugh. Eldest senior brother, I didn't do anything just now. What do you mean by that? Tang Xiaoyu's face twitched. After complaining about Lian Yi, Tang Xiaoyu's expression turned serious. Palace Master, eldest senior brother, what do you think about the Everlasting Pavilion and the Alliance? What else is there to consider? Do we even have time to think about it? Tian Xingyi threw down these words and strode away. Lian Yi glanced at Tang Xiaoyu helplessly and followed Tian Xingyi. Palace Master, can we win? This was what Tang Xiaoyu was most concerned about. The disparity in strength is too great. The outcome has been decided. Tian Xingyi let out a long sigh. In the forbidden area. After Kong Shinmu entered the passageway, he followed Tang Xiaoyu's instructions and came to a cave abode. A majestic statue was enshrined in the center of the cave abode. As soon as Kong Shinmu entered, he felt a kind of pressure from his bloodline. He knelt in front of the statue and bowed respectfully. You! As he bowed, he heard a deep voice. Kong Shinmu instinctively became alert and raised his head. An old man walked out from behind the statue. He was wearing a long robe and holding a bronze jade folding fan. To Kong Shinmu, the person who came was very unfamiliar. But the bronze jade folding fan in the person's hand was very familiar to Kong Shinmu. It was the magical artifact of an ancestor of the Dragon God clan. Junior Kong Shinmu greets ancestor. Kong Shinmu bowed respectfully. Kong Shinmu, right? The old man replied with a smile. I'm not your ancestor. Kong Shinmu was confused. According to Tang Xiaoyu, The person enshrined here was the ancestor of the Dragon God clan. Moreover, the bronze jade folding fan in the person's hand also proved his identity. If he was not an ancestor of the Dragon God clan, where did this bronze jade folding fan come from? I'm sorry, I took this folding fan without permission. The old man seemed to realize what Kong Shinmu cared about, so he said and then handed the bronze jade folding fan to Kong Shinmu. Kong Shinmu hurriedly stepped back. I dare not. I didn't know this folding fan was yours. Now I give it back to you. There's nothing to be afraid of. It was originally yours. The old man said with a smile. Seeing that Kong Shinmu still refused to take the fan, he put the fan in front of the statue. Kong Shinmu looked at the fan and then at the statue. This old man was indeed a little different from the statue. This was the forbidden area of the Tianyuan Palace. Anyone who could appear here must be an elder of the Tianyuan Palace. Kong Shinmu, you don't have to be so formal. The old man smiled kindly. He seemed to have thought of something and said, You're right. He seemed to think of something and said, In a sense, you should call me Martial Uncle. Martial Uncle? Kong Shinmu's first reaction was that this person was the junior of his master, Emperor Shi. However, he had basically seen all of his master's junior, but he had never seen this person. The old man paused and said, My name is Su Guang. Before the old man said his name, Kong Shinmu still thought that this must be the martial uncle that he had never met. Now that he said his name, Kong Shinmu was sure that he had never seen this martial uncle. What? Feng didn't tell you about me? Su Guang saw that Kong Shinmu's face was full of doubt, so he couldn't help but blame him. Feng. Kong Shinmu's heart suddenly froze. This senior Su Guang actually knew Feng. Su Guang saw Kong Shinmu's reaction and knew that he had guessed correctly. He couldn't help but feel a little dissatisfied. Feng gave his power of inheritance to this kid and instructed him to find him. In the end, he didn't even introduce himself to the other party? I'm sorry for my lack of manners. Kong Shinmu's words and actions were humble and courteous. It's not your fault. It's Feng's fault. Su Guang said faintly. You said that when he asked you to be his successor, he should at least tell you about his social circle, right? It shouldn't be so awkward for us to meet, right? Senior. Kong Shinmu didn't know what to say for a moment. From the first time he entered Feng's secret realm, Kong Shinmu had always thought that Feng no longer existed. Because he had already passed away, there was such a thing as the power of inheritance. Now it seemed that things didn't seem to be the case. Feng should still exist somewhere in the world. This senior who called himself Su Guang was the master of the Tianyuan Palace Lord, right? You don't have to be so polite. Su Guang had always been unceremonious. He turned and pointed to the bronze jade folding fan on the stage. I picked that fan up. Senior. Call me Martial Uncle. Martial Uncle. Kong Shinmu changed the way he addressed him. But he still felt that something was strange. Chapter 5764. If you need it, go ahead and get it. Su Guang generously stepped aside, making way for Kong Shinmu. I dare not. Kong Shinmu knew very well that this was the ritual implement of the dragon god's ancestor. How could he bear to take it? You're already here. What's there to be afraid of? Su Guang laughed when he heard this. Then, he pointed a finger in the air. Kong Shinmu's body uncontrollably walked in front of the statue, and the ancient bronze jade folding fan floated up. Kong Shinmu thought for a moment, then took the ancient bronze jade folding fan. A large amount of information surged out from it. It was about the ancestor of the dragon gods. The ancestor of the dragon gods worshipped by the heavenly Yuan Palace was usually called Jiang Shu. Jiang Shu had traveled outside thousands of years ago. He had been to many worlds, including the other world. He had spent the longest time in the other world. After returning from the other world, he came to the extraterritorial realm. He was accidentally involved in a major war in the extraterritorial realm. To the extraterritorial realm, the war had caused too many losses. Hundreds of powerful sects in the extraterritorial realm were involved. In the end, they did not survive and fell in the long river of history. Unfortunately, Jiang Shu came to the extraterritorial realm just in time for the war. When he arrived, the war was basically over. The entire extraterritorial realm was in chaos. He happened to meet the palace master of the Heavenly Yuan Palace, Tian Xingyi. Tian Xingyi, whom he had casually saved, was the disciple of Su Guang, whom he had met once in the other world. Later, Tian Xingyi worshipped Jiang Shu. It could be said that without Jiang Shu, it was uncertain whether the Heavenly Yuan Palace could continue to exist. This ancient bronze jade folding fan recorded Jiang Shu's life experiences. Kong Xinmu looked through it briefly. He did not know what the end of Jiang Shu's ancestor was. Jiang Shu's ancestor had left the ancient bronze folding fan in the Heavenly Yuan Palace. If one day a member of the Dragon Gods came to the Heavenly Yuan Palace, he would hand it over to the descendant of the Dragon Gods. Take it. It's what you deserve. Su Guang smiled and turned to sit on the stone table in front of Jiang Shu's statue. Kong Xinmu accepted the bronze jade folding fan. There's nothing else here. You can go now. Su Guang paused for a moment, glanced at the environment, and added, "That's right. Of course, if you want to stroll around, you can. In the forbidden area of the Heavenly Yuan Palace, there are several kinds of natural forces with supreme divine power. You can see if you can comprehend them. If you can take them away." Su Guang's words made Kong Xinmu feel strange. This was a forbidden area of the Tianyuan Palace, and Su Guang was the master of the Tianyuan Palace's palace lord, Tian Xingyi. Did Tian Xingyi know that Su Guang was openly giving away his sect's supreme divine power, the power of nature? Of course, Kong Xinmu still wanted to try and comprehend the force of nature that existed in the Forbidden Land. "Thank you, senior." Kong Xinmu did not refuse and planned to give it a try. It was rare to have such an opportunity to comprehend the power of nature, so Kong Xinmu naturally would not miss it. Among the several kinds of supreme divine powers that Kong Xinmu had comprehended, only the supreme spirit flame had reached the 9th level. The other supreme divine powers, after experiencing several battles, had more or less improved. Kong Xinmu's cultivation system was affected by the 7 devouring demon sealing mantra, and coupled with the mutation of the supreme spirit flame, Kong Xinmu's supreme divine power could only reach the 9th level, and could not improve further. As long as all the supreme divine powers he comprehended reached the 9th level, the door to the realm of laws would open. Regarding this, Jiang Shenwu had seriously comprehended this before. The so-called comprehension of all the supreme divine powers to the 9th level was perhaps just a kind of condition. The real breakthrough depended on the cultivation of the 7 devouring demon sealing mantra. Originally, the 7 devouring demon sealing mantra could only advance by absorbing the power of laws, but with the appearance of the 7 devouring demon sealing mantra, and the appearance of the bipolar mirror, the advancement of the 7 devouring demon sealing mantra seemed to be related to the cultivator's own supreme divine power. When many kinds of supreme divine powers reached the 9th level, the 7 devouring demon sealing mantra would advance faster. Kong Xinmu's cultivation system itself was a diversified cultivation system. Only by cultivating diversified supreme divine powers could he improve further. Moreover, the current devouring power, combined with the power of the 7 devouring demon sealing mantra, could refine the supreme divine power's force of nature. It could refine part of the supreme divine power's force of nature and transform it into the supreme divine power that one needed. Of course, Kong Xinmu was aware of the limitations of his own cultivation. So far, he only had 2 fragments of the 7 devouring demon sealing mantra, and it was not the complete version. In the future, he would have to find the other fragments of the 7 devouring demon sealing mantra. Go! Su Guang smiled and watched Kong Xinmu's figure disappear into the swirling fog. Then, he turned back and cupped his fists at the statue. He had been waiting here for the sake of giving the ancient bronze jade folding fan to the descendant of the Dragon Gods. Now, the task was completed. Su Guang stepped forward and walked around this place. Suddenly, he sensed a certain aura and reached out to touch the air. The aura in the air had a familiar feeling. A name suddenly appeared in Su Guang's mind. Feng. It was Feng's power of inheritance. Su Guang's eyes narrowed as he glanced in the direction Kong Xinmu had left. Although he was a descendant of the Dragon Gods and his aptitude seemed to be good, he was not very clear about his cultivation talent. Did Feng just give her power of inheritance to this descendant of the Dragon Gods? Kong Xinmu left the place where the ancestors were enshrined and walked along a small path. After walking for a while, he saw several forks in the road. Kong Xinmu wanted to see what was going on at the other end of the road, but the surrounding fog was so thick that he could not see it all. Furthermore, this fog also obstructed one's soul consciousness, making it impossible for one's soul consciousness to check their surroundings as they wished. Kong Shinmu looked again, chose the path on the far right, and walked up it. It did not take long for him to reach the end of the road. In front of him was an endless lake. The surface of the lake was calm and there were no ripples. The lake water was so clear that he could see the scene under it. There was a palace standing in the water. Seeing the palace under the water, Kong Shinmu hesitated. After all, this was the forbidden area of the Tianyuan Palace. As an outsider, Tian Xingyi had given enough face to ancestor Jiang Shu by letting him in. Now, because of Senior Su Guang's words, he really did not care about the rules of the Tianyuan Palace. Kong Shinmu hesitated for a moment, then turned and walked away. Once again, he set foot on the path back. When he walked on this path for the second time, Kong Shinmu found that the fog was not ordinary fog, but a kind of supreme divine power of nature. Chapter 5765. Kong Shinmu was rather familiar with the power of the supreme mist, but he did not expect that the power of nature gathered here was somewhat different from the power of the supreme mist that he had come into contact with previously. This power of nature was not as aggressive as the power of the supreme mist that he had come into contact with previously. On the contrary, the power of nature in front of him felt very gentle. If he walked past it, or even used his soul consciousness and other powers to examine it, it would not have any offensive power. As he was thinking this, Kong Shinmu suddenly sensed something strange in his soul consciousness. The soul consciousness that returned was mixed with an unfamiliar power that invaded his soul consciousness and sea of consciousness. It was the power of nature of the power of the supreme mist that floated here. Although the power of nature of the power of the supreme mist felt very gentle, it was not gentle at all after invading his soul consciousness. Instead, it wreaked havoc. When Kong Shinmu sensed the abnormality in his soul consciousness, the power of nature of the power of the supreme mist had already invaded his soul consciousness. It surged wantonly and stirred up the sea of consciousness that had always been calm. Jiang Shenwu's soul consciousness and sea of consciousness began to churn. To him, it was as if someone was strangling his soul consciousness, causing him to feel uneasy. However, the churning in his soul consciousness quickly calmed down. More than a year ago, Kong Shinmu had devoured the power of the supreme holy ice domain when the Dharma artifact that Lang Changhong's generals had refined perished in the ancient desolate city. All this while, Kong Shinmu had not had the opportunity to comprehend the power of the supreme holy ice domain that corresponded to the power of the supreme holy ice domain. Or rather, he had not encountered the power of the supreme holy ice domain at all. Ever since he had devoured the power of the supreme holy ice domain, this power had always existed in his soul, consciousness, and sea of consciousness. After a long time, the power of the supreme holy ice domain had basically integrated into his soul consciousness. If there were any other impure energies invading his sea of consciousness, the supreme sacred ice domain would definitely expel them. This time was no exception. As soon as the supreme mist's nature power wreaked havoc in his sea of consciousness, the supreme holy ice domain quickly surrounded this power. However, the supreme sacred ice domain's power did not directly expel this power. Instead, it condensed. Kong Shinmu happened to devour this energy. With the help of the supreme sacred ice domain, the power of nature that invaded his body became his own supreme divine power after devouring it. This meant that Kong Shinmu could directly use the power of the supreme mist. He roughly sensed that the supreme mist's power he had just devoured was only one level. Kong Shinmu looked at the supreme mist's force of nature and did not hesitate to release his devouring power to devour it. He did not intend to devour all the power of nature in the supreme mist's force of nature. He intended to stop as soon as he reached the 5th level of the supreme mist's force of nature. What Jiang Shenwu didn't expect was that after he unleashed his devouring power, not only did he devour all the power of nature of the supreme fog that had gathered in the passageway, but he also devoured the power of nature of the supreme divine power that was drifting in the surroundings. The power of nature of supreme divine power that he devoured was very heterogeneous. On the surface, there was a total of 3 types of supreme divine power. Among them, there was the power of nature from the power of supreme mysterious iron, the power of nature from the power of supreme wind, and the power of supreme sacred land. Compared to the previous 2 types of supreme divine power, the power of supreme sacred land's power of nature was much less concentrated. Even so, after devouring the power of supreme sacred land's power of nature, his power of supreme sacred land's power was enhanced. The power of Supreme Sacred Land barely reached the 6th level. Following closely behind was the Supreme Divine Power and the Supreme Dark Iron Power, which had reached the 7th level. There was also the power of Supreme Wind's Force of Nature. Kong Shinmu had previously fought with the Supreme Wind's Force of Supreme Wind, but he did not devour the Supreme Wind's Force of Supreme Wind. Now that he had devoured a large amount of power of Supreme Wind's Force of Nature, he could only reach the 3rd level after refining it. After gathering the power of Supreme Divine Power, Kong Shinmu retracted his devouring power. If he did not retract his devouring power quickly, it would continue to devour the power of nature of Supreme Divine Power. This was the Heavenly Yuan Palace's forbidden area. Senior Su Guang allowed him to come in and refine the power of Supreme Divine Power, which was already giving face to Ancestor Jiang Shu. He had to be content. Kong Shinmu retracted his devouring power and left the place. He walked according to the way he came, but he did not return to the statue of Ancestor Jiang Shu. He did not even see Senior Su Guang. There was no fog on the road under his feet. On the contrary, his vision was very clear, and he could see far away. Because of this, Kong Shinmu felt that there was something fishy about this matter. Although he had walked a long distance when he came here, the journey was not as long as it was now. Looking at his surroundings, it was brighter than before, but the aura that permeated the air was the same as before. Based on the aura in the surroundings, Kong Shinmu felt that he did not go the wrong way. However, he could not see the end of the road under his feet, which made him a little confused. Could it be some kind of boundary? Or some secret realm? No matter what, Heavenly Yuan Palace was a famous sect in the outer domain. Moreover, the sect had a rich history. It was completely normal for there to be boundary or secret realms in the forbidden area. After Su Guang instructed Kong Shinmu to refine the power of Supreme Divine Power, he left the place where Jiang Shu's statue was. When he appeared again, he was at the entrance of the forbidden area. With Palace Master Tian Xingyi in the lead, Tang Xiaoyu and the other disciples followed closely behind, waiting there. Seeing Su Guang appear, Tian Xingyi immediately went forward. Master! Tian Xingyi did not expect to see his master today, and was a little surprised. Greetings, Grandmaster. Tang Xiaoyu and the others respectfully bowed. Su Guang had arrived. Tang Xiaoyu was well behaved, respectfully standing to the side, not daring to raise his head. Seeing this scene, Lian Yi felt helpless. In the entire Heavenly Yuan Palace, the only person who could suppress Tang Xiaoyu was the Palace Master's master, Senior Su Guang. With so many people, Su Guang found Tang Xiaoyu in the crowd with his head lowered, and strode towards Tang Xiaoyu. Hearing the footsteps getting closer and closer, Tang Xiaoyu's heart was filled with bitterness. Su Guang had not been in Heavenly Yuan Palace for hundreds of years. Why did he return today? If he knew that Senior Su was here, he definitely would not have come to the forbidden area. Tang Xiaoyu, find a time to return home. Su Guang said the moment he came over. Why? Tang Xiaoyu asked, puzzled. Do you want to stay in Heavenly Yuan Palace? Su Guang paused, then asked in a low voice. Chapter 5766. Is that true? Su Guang asked Tang Xiaoyu solemnly. Of course. Tang Xiaoyu nodded affirmatively. He added, of course, just don't make me the soul of Tianyuan Palace. As he finished speaking, he shot a glance at Lian Yi, using his eyes to warn him not to act rashly. Lian Yi was helpless about this. He was only following orders. Tang Xiaoyu would have been caught long ago if he had not gone easy on him. Since that's the case, why don't you go home immediately? Su Guang said quickly. Suddenly, he felt that something was wrong and looked at Lian Yi. Lian Yi, I'll have to trouble you to send Tang Xiaoyu home. Yes, Grandmaster. Lian Yi accepted the order respectfully. Only Tang Xiaoyu had not processed the situation. He looked at Lian Yi and then at Su Guang, feeling very confused. Grandmaster, why did you expel me from Tianyuan Palace as soon as you returned? Everything has to be reasonable, right? If you don't give me a reasonable explanation, I won't leave even if I act unreasonable and shamelessly. This happened too suddenly. Tang Xiaoyu could not accept it at all. Moreover, if he left, what would happen to Kong Shinmu? Tianyuan Palace was the only place Kong Shinmu could rely on. If he left Tianyuan Palace, Kong Shinmu would be in endless trouble. Do you think I'm that kind of unreasonable person at my age? Su Guang raised an eyebrow and glanced at Lian Yi. Set off as soon as possible. Yes, Grandmaster. Lian Yi took the order and forcefully left Tianyuan Palace with Tang Xiaoyu. Tang Xiaoyu had a high level of attainment in the manifestation essence superimposition technique, but he had been under Lian Yi's supervision since the beginning. Even though he had made many improvements to the manifestation essence superimposition technique, Lian Yi had long figured out Tang Xiaoyu's routine and could easily find where Tang Xiaoyu's manifestation essence superimposition technique was. Only then did Tang Xiaoyu realize that he could not escape Lian Yi's grasp once Lian Yi got serious. Eldest senior brother, why didn't you just take me away? Tang Xiaoyu gave up jumping around and obediently followed Lian Yi. Because Palace Master only told me to follow you, he didn't say anything about capturing you. He said that you would come back sooner or later. Lian Yi said honestly. Eldest senior brother, you guys. Tang Xiaoyu was momentarily speechless. Tang Xiaoyu's home was in Tang Village. In other words, when Tian Xingyi first met Tang Xiaoyu, it was in Tang Village. At that time, Tang Xiaoyu had gotten into some kind of trouble and was being hunted down. Tian Xing had conveniently helped Tang Xiaoyu. In the end, for some unknown reason, he brought Tang Xiaoyu to the Heavenly Origin Palace. The Tang Village was located in the north of the Nightmare region, which was relatively remote. Later on, when Tang Xiaoyu went out to train, he also went to the Dun Realm, but he didn't go home. In his words, home was too far away, and he might not be able to find the way. This time, Tang Xiaoyu was personally driven out of the sect by Su Guang. Being chased out of Heaven Origin Palace was one thing, but Tang Xiaoyu would definitely not return home. In order to supervise his return home, Su Guang had no choice but to send out his right-hand man, Lian Yi. Eldest senior brother, why did Su Guang? Under Lian Yi's friendly gaze, Tang Xiaoyu reluctantly added a sentence. Must senior chase me away? He hasn't returned to the Heavenly Origin Palace for a long time. It's not right to chase me away now that he's back. Do you know about the crack at the boundary of the world? Lian Yi asked after a moment of thought. I do. The crack doesn't just affect the Heavenly Origin Palace, but the entire outer realm. There's no need to worry too much about it. Tang Xiaoyu pursed his lips and said, I knew you would think that. Lian Yi glanced at Tang Xiaoyu, then grabbed him and sped up. Heavenly Origin Palace. Su Guang had sent Tang Xiaoyu back to Tang Village because he had sensed the crack at the boundary of the world. Tang Village, as its name suggested, was an ordinary village. However, the people living in the village were all top-notch almighties. Especially the Tang Village chief, who was an expert of laws. The appearance of the crack at the boundary of the world seemed to affect the entire outer realm, but in fact, the Heavenly Origin Palace was the most affected. Coupled with the Allied Alliance's pincer attack, the Heavenly Origin Palace might be destroyed. The only one who could help the Heavenly Origin Palace was the expert of laws in Tang Village. Su Guang knew about this. Once Tian Xingyi knew, Lian Yi quickly understood as well. Even the other disciples realized the severity of the crack at the boundary of the world. Only Tang Xiaoyu still didn't know anything. I never thought that one day, the survival of the Heavenly Origin Palace would fall on Tang Xiaoyu's shoulders. Tian Xingyi stroked his beard, his tone a little strange. This kid's talent is not bad, but I feel like he's not serious at all, Su Guang said. However, I don't know if Tang Xiaoyu's luck is good, but he actually brought back a descendant of the dragon gods. Tian Xingyi glanced in the direction of the Forbidden Land. The strength of Kong Shinmu's talent had already exceeded his expectations. This kid is about the same as Jiang Shu. Su Guang had already seen Kong Shinmu's ability, and his evaluation was very pertinent. He's also more handsome than Jiang Shu. Master, if Jiang Shu hears what you said, I believe he won't let you off. Tian Xingyi's expression was a little strange. Su Guang glanced outside the Heavenly Origin Palace, where the crack at the boundary of the world was. The people from the United Alliance have already arrived at Sun City. Suddenly Su Guang said, Master, please stay here and protect Kong Shinmu. I'll go to Sun City, Tian Xingyi said, knowing that this matter could not be neglected. From the looks of it, the United Alliance obviously wants to get rid of the Heavenly Origin Palace. No matter what, Don't leave the Heavenly Origin Palace. Xueqi understood the thoughts of the people from the United Alliance too well. They had long had ideas about the Heavenly Origin Palace, and this mission was just to express their thoughts. Xueqi's figure moved, and he left the Heavenly Origin Palace. A voice immediately sounded in Tianxingyi's ears. Kong Xinmu is the inheritor of the power that my friend has bestowed upon him. You must ensure his safety. After Tianxingyi received the order, he went to the exit of the Forbidden Land. In the Forbidden Land, Kong Xinmu came to an unfamiliar place. It was the supreme territory power that ancestor Jiangshu had left behind. Based on what Kong Xinmu had sensed, he did not know the attribute of the supreme territory power, and could only judge that it was a type of supreme territory power. Moreover, he had already unknowingly entered the range of the supreme territory power. The deeper he went into the range of the supreme territory, the more he could feel the existence of the supreme territory power. However, he still could not tell what kind of supreme territory power it was. As he continued to move forward, he felt that his supreme territory power was moving strangely, and it gradually started to circulate. This mysterious supreme territory power resonated with the supreme territory power that Kong Xinmu currently possessed. What kind of supreme territory power was this? Or was this a type of supreme territory power that had no attribute? Chapter 57-67. Kong Xinmu sensed the surrounding supreme territory's power again, and confirmed that there were no attributes. He tried to release one of the supreme divine powers, the power of supreme mysterious iron. He had mastered the power of supreme mysterious iron for some time, but he had not comprehended the corresponding supreme territory's power of supreme mysterious iron. The power of supreme mysterious iron spread around Kong Xinmu's body, and gradually seeped into the surrounding supreme territory. What happened next caused Jiang Xinwu to be stupefied. Originally, he had not comprehended the power of supreme mysterious iron's power of supreme mysterious iron's power of supreme mysterious iron. However, at this moment, when he unfolded this mysterious unknown territory, he actually unfolded the power of supreme mysterious iron. Moreover, Kong Xinmu could control the power of supreme mysterious iron's power of supreme mysterious iron that suddenly unfolded. As Kong Xinmu's thoughts changed continuously, the power of supreme mysterious iron's power of supreme mysterious iron's power of supreme mysterious iron kept changing. To confirm his guess, Kong Xinmu retracted the power of supreme mysterious iron. The moment he retracted the power of supreme mysterious iron, the power of supreme mysterious iron's power of supreme mysterious iron's power of supreme mysterious iron was also retracted. Kong Xinmu could clearly feel the changes that happened to his power of supreme mysterious iron. After releasing the power of supreme mysterious iron, his power of supreme mysterious iron had unfolded the power of supreme mysterious iron's power of supreme mysterious iron. Then, he released the power of Holy Land. This was a type of holy attribute supreme divine power. Ever since he had devoured it, it had maintained its original level. It was only recently that he had made some progress. Moreover, he could clearly feel that the cultivation of the power of supreme sacred land was much more difficult than ordinary supreme divine power. With such a high difficulty level of supreme divine power, the corresponding power of supreme territory's difficulty would definitely be higher. To Kong Xinmu, although he had not completely comprehended the power of supreme mysterious iron's power of supreme mysterious iron's power of supreme territory, there were some signs. To be able to quickly comprehend the power of supreme mysterious iron's power of supreme mysterious iron's power of supreme divine power was considered reasonable. The power of supreme holy land was different. This was a type of supreme god power that Kong Xinmu had not mastered. He would not even be able to use the power of the supreme sacred land to unleash supreme martial skills, let alone comprehend the corresponding supreme power of the domain. The moment Kong Xinmu released the supreme sacred land's power, the supreme sacred land's power flew over and spread out in this attributeless domain. Then, Kong Xinmu clearly felt something extra in his mind. Information about domain power was gradually produced. This feeling was the domain power of the Supreme Holy Land. Kong Xinmu condensed the power of the Supreme Holy Earth's domain power, controlled the power of the Supreme Holy Earth, and successfully condensed the corresponding supreme martial skill of the Supreme Holy Earth. At this point, Kong Xinmu also understood. The attributeless domain power here could be combined with any supreme divine power, thereby helping the supreme divine power comprehend the corresponding supreme territory's power of supreme divine power as soon as possible. He did not expect Tianyuan Palace to have such a magical domain power. It was indeed a large sect with a strong foundation. After discovering that he had entered a domain world, Kong Xinmu used his soul consciousness to size up the scope of this domain world. Even though his soul consciousness was very strong and covered a wide range, he still could not detect the boundary of this domain world. Perhaps it had something to do with the domain world's restrictions on the soul consciousness, which hindered the extension of the soul consciousness. In the domain world, Kong Xinmu had already successfully mastered the power of domain of 2 supreme divine powers with the help of the power of domain here. He could clearly sense that the domain power of the space he was in had become much weaker. In other words, after comprehending the corresponding supreme territory's power of supreme divine power, the supreme territory's power of supreme territory in this attributeless supreme domain world was relatively weaker. Kong Xinmu specially controlled the supreme divine flame and the supreme soul power to release other supreme divine powers one after another. Not long after, all of them comprehended the supreme territory's power. The supreme divine flame was the first supreme divine power that Kong Xinmu cultivated to the 9th realm, and there were some changes along the way. As the power of the supreme divine fire mutated, the power of the supreme divine fire domain also changed. In short, it was a supreme divine power with supreme territory's power, so there was no need to continue to comprehend it. In that case, it was the supreme soul power's turn next. Originally, Kong Xinmu's understanding of the supreme soul power was a spiritual type supreme divine power that was related to the soul consciousness. It would definitely be very difficult to comprehend the corresponding supreme territory's power. It was not until later that Kong Xinmu met Wanzong, a mysterious expert. In the sealed secret realm, Kong Xinmu met Wanzong in the ancient desolate ancient city, and in a period of experience after that, he also met Wanzong by chance. Kong Xinmu had never dared to underestimate Wanzong's strength. The two of them had noticed each other, but there had never been a collision of power. After the self-sealed secret realm collapsed, Kong Xinmu fell into the foreign realm and met Wanzong again. From that moment on, Kong Xinmu realized how terrifying Wanzong's strength was. The gap between his and Wanzong's cultivation was not just a gap in realm, but a gap in all aspects. At the critical moment, it was the supreme soul power that played a role. Kong Xinmu's understanding of the supreme soul power began to change. It could repel Wanzong's power. It wasn't just the pure power of the soul. However, Kong Xinmu did not have a clear understanding of what this power was. After thinking for a moment, Kong Xinmu released the supreme soul power. After that battle, the appearance of the supreme soul power had also changed to a certain extent and turned red. The crimson supreme soul power was extremely eye-catching in the invisible domain world. With Kong Xinmu as the center, the supreme soul power spread out in all directions. Kong Xinmu carefully sensed the supreme soul power, only to notice that the red power of the soul circled around the domain world and then returned. After restraining the supreme soul power, Kong Xinmu did not sense any signs of the supreme soul power producing domain world. This was strange. Other supreme divine powers were fine, but why didn't it work when it came to the supreme soul power? With this thought in mind, Kong Xinmu released the supreme divine flame that had reached the 9th level. The moment the 9th level supreme divine flame was released, Kong Xinmu clearly felt the domain world churning. The supreme divine flame itself had already released the supreme domain power. At this time, when it entered the domain world, it seemed to form a resonance with it, and a corresponding supreme domain power was released. Chapter 5768. As time passed, the domain power of the supreme divine flame had completely occupied the domain world there. At the same time, Kong Xinmu also felt the scope of the entire domain world. It was no exaggeration to say that the domain world was like a brand new world that was above this place. However, there was only domain power in this brand new world. As the supreme divine flame's domain power devoured the power in the domain world, Kong Xinmu felt that his domain power had reached a critical point. Looking at its saturated state, it seemed like it was about to break through. Initially, Kong Xinmu's understanding of the supreme domain power was very limited, and he only regarded it as the corresponding domain power of the supreme divine power. If the supreme divine power broke through, the corresponding domain power of the supreme divine power would also break through. However, it now seemed that the breakthrough point of the supreme domain power did not seem to be gentle with the supreme divine power. The supreme domain power was more inclined to a new kind of power, and had different considerations from the realm of the supreme divine power. What Kong Shinmu was facing at this moment was the breakthrough of the supreme divine flame's domain power. He simply sat on the ground and devoted himself to the breakthrough of the supreme divine flame's domain power. Feeling the continuous changes of the supreme divine flame's domain power, Kong Shinmu felt the world that existed in his own domain power. Kong Shinmu had a new understanding of the supreme divine power and the domain power of the supreme divine power. Supreme divine power was an existence of absolute power, and the corresponding supreme domain power could be understood as a realm of power. This realm was more abstract to understand, so most people used the term domain as a general term. As the supreme divine flame's domain power continued to devour the domain power in this domain world, the supreme domain power corresponding to the supreme divine flame was breaking through and becoming more inclined to domain power. Hence, Kong Shinmu speculated that this was not the case for the supreme divine flame's domain power. After reaching a certain realm, the supreme domain power corresponding to the other supreme divine powers would lean more towards the power of domain. On the surface, the only difference between these two forms of address was the name. However, there was a world of difference in their essence. Supreme territory power meant that this power had a corresponding supreme divine power, and it was closely related to supreme divine power. Domain power was a completely new kind of power. It could even be released independently of supreme divine power. Moreover, when one's domain power reached a certain level, it would become a new world. The world formed by domain power was related to the secret realms that appeared in various places. Of those so-called secret realms, apart from a few that were naturally formed worlds in space, most of the secret realms were man-made. Here, Seal had to be mentioned. The reason why it was called Feng's mystic realm was because this mystic realm was also created by Feng. At this moment, Jiang Shenwu's supreme divine spiritual flame and its corresponding supreme domain power were undergoing such a transformation. Once the transformation was complete, it would become a brand new domain power. This process lasted for 2 days. In the past 2 days, Kong Shinmu's supreme domain power had been devouring the domain power in the domain world. Hard work paid off, and Kong Shinmu's domain power had completed its transformation. After feeling the brand new domain power, Kong Shinmu clearly sensed that as long as he willed it, this power would be released at will. Unlike the previous supreme domain power that required mastery of supreme divine power, the current domain power could be released on its own. In short, the current domain power was a brand new power that was different from supreme divine power. However, the domain power was transformed from the domain power of supreme divine power, after all, and its essence was also related to supreme divine power. What Kong Shinmu released just now was the supreme divine flame's supreme divine domain. In that case, the domain power that he transformed at this time was the divine domain. The divine domain, as its name suggested, was a kind of domain power of flames. Kong Shinmu just tried to release it, and the domain world he was in was occupied by a sense of heat. "Kid, you're really not polite at all." Suddenly, a voice rang out from behind. Kong Shinmu's heart suddenly froze. "Senior is here, and I actually didn't notice it at all?" As soon as he turned around, he saw Xueqi hurriedly walking over with his hands behind his back. "Senior!" Kong Shinmu greeted him humbly. "Yes, Uncle Master." Xueqi frowned and emphasized impatiently. "If you weren't my disciple nephew, I wouldn't have bothered to talk to you." "Yes, Uncle Master." Kong Shinmu still changed the way he addressed Lin Li. Of course, the biggest question in his mind now was still the way he addressed Lin Li. Although he had gone to Feng's mystic realm and gained a lot, and his cultivation realm had also broken through, he had never seen Feng from the beginning to the end. However, from the beginning to the end, he had not even seen Feng. He had not even gone through the ceremony of becoming Feng's disciple. He just felt that something was off. He acknowledged Feng as his master, but he didn't know if Feng would acknowledge him as his disciple. "Thank you, Uncle Master." But then again, Xueqi guiding him to this domain world was a kind of recognition for him. "You don't have to thank me. I just promised Jiang Shu that I would give this to the descendants of the dragon gods." Xueqi smiled when he heard this. Kong Shinmu was stunned for a while, but at the same time, he felt very lucky. "That's right. Jiang Shu didn't specifically say that he would give it to you. He only said that it was a descendant of the dragon gods." Xueqi smiled playfully. "Are you very disappointed?" "I dare not." Kong Shinmu was still very self-aware. It was already a great opportunity for ancestor Jiang Shu to leave this domain world. Now that he had encountered it, he could only say that he was lucky. He didn't dare to have any complaints. The divine domain that Kong Shinmu condensed had also exhausted the domain power in this domain world. The domain world disappeared, revealing its original appearance. Only then did Kong Shinmu realize that he was still on the passage out of the forbidden area. Why? Are you still not satisfied? Seeing that Kong Shinmu was still standing still, Xueqi raised his eyebrows. He said, I'm satisfied. Kong Shinmu responded bitterly, then strode to catch up with Xueqi. By the way, Uncle Master, do you know where my ancestor is now? When passing by the statue of ancestor Jiang Shu again, Kong Shinmu pondered and asked. He had a vague feeling that ancestor Jiang Shu should be traveling somewhere. I don't know. Maybe he's dead. Xueqi hesitated for a long time before saying. He didn't seem to want to talk about this topic. After a few words, he urged Kong Shinmu to leave the forbidden area. At the exit of the forbidden area, Tian Xingyi had been waiting for a long time. Junior Kong Shinmu greets the palace master. Kong Shinmu was very grateful to Tian Xingyi. He was the one who gave him the opportunity to enter the forbidden area. He also had a good impression of the entire Tianyuan Palace. The overall atmosphere was very good. That's not necessary. Tian Xingyi smiled when he heard this. Chapter 5769. Kong Shinmu could not help but have a strange expression. He almost forgot that Senior Xueqi was Tian Xingyi's master, and Feng was his master. In that case, Tian Xingyi was indeed his senior brother. Let's talk about it later. Things are urgent now. Let's hurry up and leave. Xueqi urged. 2 days ago, Kong Shinmu entered the forbidden area of Tianyuan Palace, and then entered the domain world. He knew nothing about what happened in the outside world. In just 2 days, Tianyuan Palace was taken out of the 4 major sects by the Wuji Pavilion. Not only that, the Wuji Pavilion officially declared war on Tianyuan Palace. The branch of the United Alliance in the outer region also issued an order. Although they did not explicitly say that they were going to attack Tianyuan Palace, they had already attacked the disciples of Tianyuan Palace. In 2 days' time, all the people or forces related to the Heavenly Yuan Palace in the entire outer domain were suppressed by the United Alliance. The Wuji Pavilion had already sent 3 teams to be stationed at the gate of Yang City. The only city that was related to Tianyuan Palace was Yang City. All the disciples of Tianyuan Palace were basically gathered in Yang City to face the enemy together with the soldiers there. The terrible news came at noon that Yang City's General Duan Tian was seriously injured in order to defend against Nangong Fengyu's attack. In order to protect Yang City, General Duan Tian used all his strength to maintain the city protection formation of Yang City, and temporarily stopped the team from Wuji Pavilion from entering the palace. Duan Tian knew that only by protecting Yang City could he protect Tianyuan Palace. For that, Duan Tian paid the price and used up all his vitality. Even so, the city protection formation of Yang City might not be able to hold on for long. On the way, Kong Shinmu fell into deep thought. If he had not come to Tianyuan Palace when he came to the outer region, he might not have cared about this matter. However, not only did he go to Tianyuan Palace, but he also went to the forbidden area of Tianyuan Palace. It was reasonable for him to help Tianyuan Palace. Moreover, Tian Xingyi, the palace master of Tianyuan Palace, was his senior brother. How could he abandon his senior brother at such a time? However, what puzzled Kong Shinmu was that the place they arrived at after descending the mountain was not Yang City, but an unfamiliar jungle. Follow your senses and move forward. With your ability, you should be able to find the teleportation array. When the time comes, just activate it. Xueqi glanced at the jungle ahead and said. Kong Shinmu finally understood. Martial uncle Xueqi and senior apprentice brother Tianxing wanted to send him out of the Heaven Essence Palace. Martial uncle, senior martial brother, I've just arrived here. It's not suitable for me to wander around alone. Kong Shinmu held it in for a long time before he finally said these words. Xueqi raised his eyebrows and glanced at Kong Shinmu meaningfully. The enemies we are facing this time are the Wuji Pavilion and the United Alliance. It's not child's play. Martial uncle, I have something to tell you. Kong Shinmu decided not to hide the grudges between him and the disciples of Everlasting Pavilion in the sealed secret realm. I know everything about you, Xueqi said indifferently. Kong Shinmu suddenly felt awkward and scratched his head. The reason why the Everlasting Pavilion came to find trouble with the Heaven Essence Palace was definitely because the Heaven Essence Palace had shielded him. He was well aware of this. Just don't run away, Xueqi said and turned back. Kong Shinmu hurriedly followed Xueqi's footsteps. With Xueqi in the lead, the three quickly returned to the Heaven Essence Palace. The battlefield was basically concentrated near Yang City. Xueqi quickly informed the disciples of the Heaven Essence Palace and rushed to Yang City. Outside the Yang City gate, led by Nangong Fengyu, the group of people set up a base here. Moreover, it was not far from the city gate. Apart from the people of the Everlasting Pavilion, there were also some members of the United Alliance. Of course, there were also many sects outside the domain that had basically completed their defection in the past 2 days. More than half of the sects had chosen to join the Everlasting Pavilion. It could be said that the Heaven Essence Palace would not be able to survive this crisis unless a miracle happened. And this miracle was the one in the Tang village. This was the reason why Xueqi asked Tang Xiaoyu to return home. As long as Tang Xiaoyu could invite that existence, the Heaven Essence Palace might have a chance to survive this crisis. In fact, Xueqi also thought highly of Kong Shinmu. Although Kong Shinmu was only a junior of the Dragon God clan, based on the fact that Kong Shinmu had been chosen as the successor by Feng, Kong Shinmu was a talent that could be molded. Feng was a very picky person, regardless of whether it was his life or his cultivation. If he did not like the cultivation technique, he would not cultivate it. Take the 7 devouring demon sealing art for example. In that era, the 7 devouring demon sealing art was a very terrifying existence. When Feng cultivated the 7 devouring demon sealing art, he only had an attitude of trying. In the end, he did not cultivate for too long before he more or less understood the situation of the 7 devouring demon sealing art. He did not want to continue cultivating it. The last place they met was the other world. It had been hundreds of years since they last met. As for where Feng was now, he did not know. Master, there is something I would like to ask, Xueqi said after thinking for a long time. You want to ask about Feng, right? If I could contact Feng, I would not have gone to find help. Xueqi twitched his mouth. Xueqi laughed softly. Kong Shinmu opened his mouth, but the word master did not come out. The three of them arrived at Sun City and roughly understood the situation there. The situation was far more serious than Kong Shinmu had imagined. Moreover, when they entered Sun City, Kong Shinmu sensed that there was a problem with the city protecting formation. He had not seen how the city protecting formation looked like at its peak, but the city protecting formation now could be easily broken by anyone using the space rampart. There is a problem with the city protecting formation. Xueqi strengthened the city protecting formation, and the situation was much better than before. Stay in Sun City and do not go anywhere. I will be back soon, Xueqi said solemnly. Yes, master. Yes, Uncle Master. As soon as Xueqi finished speaking, his body turned into a cloud of green smoke and disappeared on the spot. Kong Shinmu felt the power of the realm from the green smoke. This must be Senior Xueqi's realm power. He could use space to achieve a kind of teleportation. Palace Master. There are guests from Upper State City. Just then, someone came to report. Xueqi was shocked. The city protecting formation around Sun City had been in place since the Union Alliance was banned. Recently, the Everlasting Pavilion and the Union Alliance had been attacking fiercely. After the city protecting formation was activated, no one else could get close to Sun City. Apart from the strict inspection needed to enter Sun City, there was also the Everlasting Pavilion's forces stationed at the city gates. Anyone who wanted to enter Sun City had to go through this first. Hence, they could not get close to Sun City. Chapter 5770. This subordinate is also puzzled. It was a guest who came to find us and then asked us to report to you. The person answered truthfully. Where is he? Xueqi could not help but frown. On the 2nd Ancient Street. According to the report, Xueqi and Kong Shinmu came to the 2nd Ancient Street and saw a young man in white waiting there. As soon as the two came over, The young man seemed to have sensed them and turned around. It's you. Tian Xingyi still remembered this young man. He had a chance to go to Shangzhou City once. Although he did not see the city lord, he saw this young man. In a way, this young man was the current acting city lord of Shangzhou City. Junior Purple Jade greets the Skyline Palace Lord. The young man bowed. Then he looked at Kong Xinmu and smiled. You are Kong Xinmu, right? Kong Xinmu searched his memory but did not remember seeing this young man called Purple Jade. However, from the looks of it, the other party seemed to know him. Kong Xinmu, the scarlet genius who flattened the ancient desolate city. Many of us in Shangzhou City have heard of your name. Purple Jade saw Kong Xinmu's reaction and knew what Kong Xinmu was thinking, so it gave him a simple explanation. It would have been better if Purple Jade did not explain, but Kong Xinmu was even more confused after hearing it. Flattening the ancient desolate city was already a bit exaggerated. What about the Scarlet Genius? How did he become a Scarlet Genius? Did they have to add a prefix to the word genius these days? My name is not really my given name. Just call me Kong Xinmu. Kong Xinmu did not hide anything and admitted his identity. Allow me to call you Brother Jiang. Purple Jade smiled politely. After some small talk, Purple Jade's expression turned serious. Skyline Palace Lord, Brother Jiang, I came to Sun City mainly for the Everlasting Pavilions Alliance. Purple Jade knew the City Lord's intentions the best. The City Lord had always respected Tianyuan Palace. Of the so-called 4 great sects in the Outer Realm, the City Lord only acknowledged the Heavenly Origin Palace. Now that the Heavenly Yuan Palace had encountered trouble, they naturally could not stand idly by. Even though the City Lord had yet to return to the city, he was on his way back. Compared to this matter, Tian Xingyi and Kong Xinmu were more concerned about how Purple Jade had entered the city. Kong Xinmu found that he could not see through the cub's cultivation. He felt that it should have an extraordinary domain power. The Divine Spirit Territory was a rare territory power. If even the Divine Spirit Territory could not sense the territory power, then either the territory power was of a higher grade than the Divine Spirit Territory, or the cultivator was very strong. This was the Outer Realm, where experts were as common as clouds. It was not impossible for these two things to happen at the same time. In particular, the cub had passed through the Wuji Pavilion's encirclement and entered Sun City. By the way, there's something I haven't told you yet. At this point, the cub glanced at the situation at the gate of Yang City. The Wuji Pavilion's people are everywhere at the gate of Sun City, and there are also people from the United Alliance around. I could only use some methods to enter the city. Please forgive me. This time, the cub came here mainly to show Tian Xingyi the attitude of Upper Prefecture City. The City Lord of Upper Prefecture City, Xian Che, had already rushed back after learning of the crisis that the Heavenly Yuan Palace was facing. However, he was afraid that something unexpected would happen, so he sent the cub here. No problem. Tian Xingyi smiled. Thank you, City Lord Xian Che. Tian Xingyi had never seen Xian Che before, and he could not understand why he would help the Heavenly Yuan Palace. After the cub finished explaining, it left. After taking 2 steps, his aura was no longer in the surrounding space. It was as if this person had never appeared. It was even strange. This cub, Tian Xingyi frowned. Kong Xinmu heard this and looked at Tian Xingyi, waiting for him to continue. I don't know either. Tian Xingyi thought for a while, but he had no information about the cub. Not only the cub, but also that City Lord Xian Che. It's not an exaggeration to say that this time, the Heavenly Yuan Palace will not be able to hide. I am very grateful that the Upper Prefecture City came to help, but I'm afraid that it will implicate them. Tian Xingyi still felt that this matter was inappropriate. Perhaps they have friends or relatives that are related to the Heavenly Yuan Palace, Kong Xinmu said after thinking for a while. It's not impossible. Tian Xingyi thought about Kong Xinmu and agreed with Kong Xinmu's words. At the same time, an uninvited guest arrived outside the city gates of Yang City. The person who came was tall and burly, with an unshaven beard. His clothes were very ordinary, and even looked a little shabby. He called himself Yu Hongfeng. Just by looking at his appearance, one could roughly guess that he was a rogue cultivator. However, after revealing the name Yu Hongfeng, everyone, including Nangong Fengyu, had a change of attitude towards this person. Yu Hongfeng was one of the top 10 experts of the outer region. The 10 of the top 10 experts were publicly acknowledged to be existences equivalent to the 4 great sects in the Outer Realms, and their rankings were not separated by rank. Yu Hongfeng was on the list of the top 10 experts. Are you really Yu Hongfeng? Nangong Fengyu looked at the person in front of her in surprise. Behind him, the other disciples of the Everlasting Pavilion were also sizing him up. No matter how they looked at him, he did not look like an expert. Instead, he looked like a madman pretending to be crazy. After all, in the past 2 years, there were many people who swindled people using the name of the top 10 experts. Just like the people of the Everlasting Pavilion, the guards of Yang City were also paying attention to Yu Hongfeng. Yu Hongfeng might be alone, but if the person at the city gates was really one of the top 10 experts, it would be a serious matter. Are you guys questioning my identity? Yu Hongfeng looked at Nangong Fengyu in confusion. Nangong Fengyu? He recognized Nangong Fengyu. Nangong Fengyu was not surprised at all. It's good that you recognize him. The other disciples of the Everlasting Pavilion said in unison. Elder Nangong Fengyu was an expert of the Everlasting Pavilion. Her name was known far and wide. Not to mention the outer region, even in the Duan region, there were only a few people who did not know Nangong Fengyu's name. Oh! Yu Hongfeng replied indifferently. He did not even look at Nangong Fengyu anymore. Nangong Fengyu's face instantly darkened. What an arrogant brat! Nangong Fengyu said coldly. How can you say that? What brat? Are you blind or illiterate? Which eye of yours sees that I look like a brat? Yu Hongfeng glared at Nangong Fengyu unhappily. Nangong Fengyu, aren't you just relying on the Nangong clan to support you? Who do you think you are after leaving the Nangong clan? What did you say? Nangong Fengyu hated it when people talked about him like that. Am I wrong? Are you relying on the Everlasting Pavilion? Yu Hongfeng raised his eyebrows. He even sat in the base set up by the Everlasting Pavilion and crossed his legs leisurely. Chapter 5771. Senior Yu Hongfeng is one of the 10 great experts. How could he be such an uncultured person? A disciple of the Everlasting Pavilion shouted as he was dissatisfied with Yu Hongfeng's current behavior. Yu Hongfeng glanced at the person who spoke. Am I Yu Hongfeng? Can't you just fight with me? Come on. However, we don't need our elders to deal with you. Any one of us here can beat you up. The disciple of the Everlasting Pavilion laughed impudently. In response, Yu Hongfeng faintly smiled. The disciple of the Everlasting Pavilion made the first move. Yu Hongfeng then said slowly, Everyone can see that your people attacked first. It wasn't my intention. The disciple of the Everlasting Pavilion who made the first move treated it as a joke. However, in the next moment, his mocking smile froze on his face forever. Even the disciple himself maintained his previous posture and fell to the ground. No one saw when Yu Hongfeng made his move or what technique he used. They only saw the disciple of the Everlasting Pavilion fall. Nangong Fengyu couldn't help but frown when she saw this scene. Just a moment ago, she had indeed sensed an obscure power passing through the air. However, it was so fast that even she couldn't catch it. Even if she wasn't by her side, she could clearly sense that the disciple of the Everlasting Pavilion was already dead. Although it was only a supreme expert at the 4th level of supreme divine power, Yu Hongfeng had instantly killed this disciple. This was enough to prove that he was Yu Hongfeng. Yu Hongfeng, what are you here for? Nangong Fengyu realized that this person was Yu Hongfeng and couldn't help but question his purpose of coming here. Isn't it obvious enough? I'm here to watch the show. Yu Hongfeng shrugged his shoulders innocently. Hearing that Yu Hongfeng was only here to watch the show, Nangong Fengyu secretly heaved a sigh of relief. She wasn't afraid of Yu Hongfeng. If Yu Hongfeng wanted to interfere in this matter, it would only make things more troublesome. But speaking of which, just Yu Hongfeng alone was not enough to threaten them. It was just that it was better to have less trouble. But your Everlasting Pavilion is so overbearing, Yu Hongfeng said again. There was a hint of helplessness in his tone, and he even let out a long sigh. As Yu Hongfeng spoke, he stood up and strode in the direction of Yang City. Yu Hongfeng, don't play the fool here. I think your goal from the beginning was Yang City. Nangong Fengyu's eyes narrowed. It should be the Heavenly Origin Palace. You 10 experts are the embodiment of righteousness. The thing you like to do the most is to help the weak. Nangong Fengyu's words were very clear. Not only Yu Hongfeng, but the other 10 great experts would also appear to help the Heaven Yuan Palace. After all, everyone in the outer realm knew that the 10 great experts loved to help the weak. Now that Heavenly Yuan Palace was surrounded by enemies and faced a crisis of life and death, it was not just Yu Hongfeng. The other 9 experts would definitely appear as well. Elder Nangong's words are too absolute. Suddenly, a voice filled with laughter rang out from the side. This signature smile belonged to Mao Tianyu. Mao Tianyu, why have you come to join in the fun? Yu Hongfeng could not help but frown when he heard the voice. As he spoke, he had already slapped in the direction of the voice. The seemingly light palm drew in all the spiritual power in the air in front of it, and condensed it into a long sword that pierced out. If you can come, why can't I? Mao Tianyu still spoke with a smile. He quickly neutralized Yu Hongfeng's attack and appeared in front of everyone. Unlike Yu Hongfeng's external appearance, Mao Tianyu's appearance had an imposing aura, and he was dressed much more luxuriously than Yu Hongfeng. He became the focus of the crowd as soon as he arrived. Elder Nangong, long time no see. The first person Mao Tianyu greeted was Nangong Fengyu. Nangong Fengyu also greeted him with a smile. From the looks of it, they seemed to be old friends who had not seen each other for a long time. Yu Hongfeng, you have to think it through. Mao Tianyu turned around and smiled at Yu Hongfeng as he said indifferently. His words were already very clear. Once Yu Hongfeng chose to enter Yang City, they would be enemies from then on. What's there to think about? There are many cities in the outer region, but I only remember the name Yang City. Yu Hongfeng threw down a sentence and headed straight for Yang City. Open the door. Yu Hongfeng shouted loudly. Coincidentally, at this moment, Tian Xingyi and Kong Xinmu came over. Tian Xingyi and Kong Xinmu personally welcomed Yu Hongfeng. In fact, Yu Hongfeng did not have much contact with Sky Yuan Palace. In fact, Yu Hongfeng had never been to Sky Yuan Palace before. At most, he had come to Yang City once, and he had only passed by. However, Tian Xingyi knew Yu Hongfeng's character and knew that he was a trustworthy person. Just like how Tian Xingyi trusted Yu Hongfeng also trusted Sky Yuan Palace. In Yu Hongfeng's eyes, among the 4 great sects in the outer region, only Sky Yuan Palace was qualified. The other 3 were not worthy at all. Whether it was after the incident in the outer region many years ago or now, Yu Hongfeng had always thought so. This time, when he heard that Sky Yuan Palace was in trouble, he headed straight for Yang City. Please. Tian Xingyi invited Yu Hongfeng into Yang City. Where's Che? As soon as he entered the city, Yu Hongfeng had a clear view of the current situation in Yang City. He originally thought that Che would be in Yang City, but now it seemed that he was not in Yang City. He's not here, Tian Xingyi said after thinking for a moment. Che was also one of the top 10 experts. You're the first warrior, Tian Xingyi said jokingly when he saw Yu Hongfeng's surprised expression. That's not right. Che should be the first warrior. Yu Hongfeng tacitly agreed with the term, warrior. He furrowed his brows, as if he could not understand why Che had not come to Yang City yet. Sky Yuan Palace's current situation, everyone knows. Tian Xingyi smiled bitterly. Let me introduce you. This is my junior brother, Kong Xinmu. Tian Xingyi gave a simple introduction. This is one of the top 10 experts, Yu Hongfeng. Kong Xinmu. I heard about him on the way here. They say he's a crimson genius. Yu Hongfeng sized up Kong Xinmu and nodded repeatedly. He's indeed a genius. Kong Xinmu had a strange expression. He did not know who started the rumor. Of all the things, why did they have to say a crimson genius? With a crimson genius, we'll be safe this time. Yu Hongfeng was a straightforward person and spoke very directly. He could see the situation of Kong Xinmu's cultivation. Looking at Kong Xinmu's posture, he should have just condensed his domain power not long ago. There was a scorching aura around him, most likely a domain power related to flames. Looking at Kong Xinmu's talent and the fact that he was a crimson genius, the flame he cultivated was not an ordinary flame. It was very likely a heaven and earth sacred flame, a god spirit flame. If it was a god spirit flame, then his domain power should be a god spirit domain. Chapter 5772. Speaking of which, the current situation of the Heavenly Origin Palace has been around for hundreds of years. Yu Hongfeng spent most of his time outside and often went to the Nightmare region. The Outer Realm and the Nightmare region were two different worlds, but because some of the Allied Alliance's members were in the Outer Realm, the Nightmare region had used a certain method to open a passage between the two worlds. Even ordinary supreme cultivators could travel between the Outer Realm and the Nightmare region through the passage. However, the number of ordinary supreme cultivators passing through each time was limited. They needed to be accompanied and guarded by high-ranking supreme cultivators. Although there was a passage between the two worlds, it was very long. There was no guarantee that one would encounter any danger during the passage. Even high-ranking supreme cultivators had to be careful when passing through the passage. This was a passage that spanned two worlds. It passed through layers of space, and the most difficult opponent to deal with was the spatial storm. Of course, the top 10 experts could pass through the passage on their own. Ever since the passage had been opened, it wasn't just Yu Hongfeng. The other top 10 experts had more or less gone to the Nightmare region. The Nightmare region and the Outer Realm were two different worlds. But before the incident in the Outer Realm, there had been a parallel space layer between the Nightmare region and the Outer Realm. The existence of that space layer was equivalent to the gate of contract between this world and the other world. Unlike the contract gate, that spatial layer was always open. Any cultivator could sense the spatial layer and pass through it. However, after the matter that concerned the life and death of the Outer Realm happened, the space layer also disappeared. Later, some people had searched for it, including the top 10 experts. Unfortunately, they hadn't found it. Some people guessed that the space layer had disappeared with the Great Battle. This theory was gradually accepted by everyone. After all, even the top 10 experts couldn't find the space layer. No one could guarantee that it still existed. However, some people believed that it still existed. The top 10 experts hadn't found it, but only for the time being. In other words, the space layer was like some special secret realms that constantly moved through space. The reason why they couldn't find it might be because they had encountered it and moved to another world. In any case, the space layer didn't exist for the time being. There was now a new passage connecting the two worlds. Hearing Yu Hongfeng's words, Xueqi sighed helplessly. He had already sensed what Yu Hongfeng had said. That was why they had sent people to the other world hundreds of years ago. Before leaving Heavenly Yuan Palace, Senior Jiang Shu had said that if Heavenly Yuan Palace was in danger in the future, they could go to the other realm to look for him. The disciple who had gone to the other world had already been gone for 100 years, and there had been no news from him until now. No one knew how the disciple was doing. Let's not worry about this for now. Let's get through this crisis first. Yu Hongfeng casually walked forward. Che really didn't come? However, Yu Hongfeng still felt that this was inconceivable. Based on his understanding of Clear, it was impossible that Clear had not made a move yet. As Kong Xinmu pondered the Che Yu Hongfeng mentioned, he automatically thought of Shangzhou City's city lord, Xin Che. Seeing Xueqi's confused expression, Yu Hongfeng quickly reacted. I almost forgot. Ever since Che faded out, he called himself Xin Che. Yu Hongfeng slapped his forehead. You mean Upper Continent City Lord Xin Che? Xueqi finally reacted. Seeing Yu Hongfeng nod his head, Xueqi smiled and said, Upper Continent City has already sent someone. This time, I have to thank you. I came here because my opponent is in the Nangong family. However, he is like a turtle hiding in its shell, not daring to show himself. Yu Hongfeng raised his eyebrows. This time, I want to make the everlasting pavilion unhappy. That way, I will feel better. From this, one could basically see Yu Hongfeng's way of doing things. He had always been straightforward, saying whatever he wanted to say, never hiding anything. This time, his goal was simply to make the everlasting pavilion unhappy, and also to teach the arrogant Nangong family a lesson. As for Xin Che, I remember that he once said that he owed Su Guang a favor. This time, he will not just stand by and watch, Yu Hongfeng said after thinking for a moment. Now, Xueqi understood why Xin Che was in the same position as them. I'm coming. At this moment, a clear voice suddenly rang out. Then, a green figure appeared from the side of the space. The three people present, including Kong Xinmu, only felt a slight distortion in the space. Xin Che, I thought you weren't coming. Yu Hongfeng laughed and went forward to greet him. I may be late, but I will definitely not be absent. Xian Che laughed heartily. Xian Che and Purple Jade were handsome men with the same temperament. Just from his appearance, he looked more like a refined scholar. What made Kong Xinmu feel a little uncomfortable was that even Xian Che knew that he was a scarlet genius. He could not help but sigh at the person who spread the rumor. Even he himself almost believed that he was a scarlet genius. After the few people exchanged greetings, a scout came to report that the Upper Continent City had already sent a representative to challenge them. Kong Xinmu followed the few people to the city gate once again. They stood on the city wall, which was dozens of feet high. At a glance, they saw the person who was challenging them. It was Upper Continent City's Purple Jade. Purple Jade held a white jade folding fan and pointed it at Nangong Fengyu. The atmosphere between the two of them was extremely tense, and it looked like they were about to fight. Purple Jade, let your city lord speak. Nangong Fengyu knew Purple Jade from Upper Continent City. Although this kid was young and looked quite well behaved, his methods were extremely cruel. However, no matter what, Purple Jade was just a follower of Upper Continent City's city lord and was not qualified to clamor here. Is there something wrong with your brain? The entire outer territory knows that at this stage, I am the city lord of Upper Continent City. I didn't ask your pavilion master to confront me in person because I sympathize with his legs. What are you doing here? The tone of Purple Jade's words made Kong Xinmu involuntarily think of a person. Xian Che seemed to have seen through Kong Xinmu's thoughts and said, Purple Jade has always been close to Tang Xiaoyu. Kong Xinmu nodded. No wonder the two looked so similar. It turned out that they were friends. Looking at the time, the Wuji Pavilion should be in chaos now. We should also prepare to fight back, Xian Che said solemnly. Almost as soon as Xian Che's voice fell, news came from the Wuji Pavilion outside the city gate. It said that a large number of unknown people had invaded the Wuji Pavilion, and that one person had broken into the Wuji Pavilion's cultivation secret realm, interfered with the secret technique elders who were about to come out of seclusion, and even sealed the exit of the secret realm. The exit was sealed from the secret realm? Nangong Fengyu's eyes widened when she heard this and shouted angrily. Do you think this is possible? Don't they need to come out? Chapter 5773. Sect Leader Hizei? Nangong Fengyu's face darkened. If someone else sealed the mystic realm from the inside, it would be impossible for them to come out. But Headmaster Hizei was different. No matter where he sealed the mystic realm, he could escape at will. This was because Headmaster Hizei had also mastered the 10,000 Elephants Origin Superposition Technique. It was said that the 10,000 Elephants Origin Stacking Technique was a secret movement technique of the Heavenly Yuan Palace. However, Sect Master Hizei was a cultivator of the Upper State City, and he had actually mastered the 10,000 Elephants Origin Stacking Technique. What was most infuriating was that Sect Leader Hizei had not only mastered the Manifestation Essence Superposition Technique, but he had also cultivated it to the Nine Supremes realm. The Heavenly Origin Palace's myriad manifestation origin superimposition technique was generally divided by the 10 Yuan realm. However, this was a very conventional division method. After mastering the Manifestation Origin Superposition Technique, everyone would make certain changes according to their own supreme divine power or supreme domain power. In other words, the Manifestation Origin Stacking Technique would change according to the cultivator's own cultivation method. In the Heavenly Origin Palace, Tang Xiaoyu's change was the most obvious. Ever since Tang Xiaoyu had cultivated the Manifestation Origin Stacking Technique, the Manifestation Origin Stacking Technique had begun to evolve uncontrollably. It could be said that Tang Xiaoyu had created a precedent for the evolution of the Manifestation Origin Stacking Technique. After Headmaster Hizei of Upper Continent City cultivated the Manifestation Origin Stacking Technique, he naturally reached the 10th elemental stage. It was only when Sect Leader Hizei's supreme domain power successfully transformed into domain power that everything changed. Sect Leader Hizei's Manifestation Essence Superposition art had changed as well, becoming the realm of the Nine Supremes. What was surprising was that Sect Leader Hizei seemed to have an innate ability to comprehend the Manifestation Origin Stacking Technique. Within 100 years, he had cultivated the evolved Manifestation Origin Stacking Technique to the state of Nine Supremes. The realm of the Nine Supremes could be considered the great perfection realm of the Manifestation Origin Superposition art. With such a powerful body movement secret technique, It was a piece of cake for him to escape from the sealed secret realm. Because of this, every time Nangong Fengyu thought of this matter, she would feel a belly full of anger. Are you sure it's sect leader Hizhe? Nangong Fengyu glared at him and asked again. This subordinate is certain. The man lowered his head and answered submissively. Nangong Fengyu was so angry that she clenched her fists. After a long time she finally said, "Start the battle." Yes. The person responded and hurriedly returned. The members of the United Alliance who were waiting here were also ready. Protector Qin Sang, the person who attacked the left protector Tang Xiaoyu, has left the Heaven's Origin Palace not long ago and is currently heading to the Nightmare region. Someone from the Union Alliance came to report. Qin Sang was one of the protectors of the United Union. Her status was similar to that of the left protector. However, in terms of individual strength, Qin Sang was much stronger than the left protector, and he had already mastered the power of territory. Unlike the left protector who spent most of her time in the outer realm, Protector Qin Sang spent most of her time in the Nightmare domain. She had even been to the other world before. Traveling to various places made his combat ability very strong. You may leave. Qin Sang nodded and took out a voice transmission talisman. Although their target was the entire Heavenly Yuan Palace, they did not care about a mere Heavenly Yuan Palace disciple like Tang Xiaoyu. However, Tang Xiaoyu had attacked and killed the left protector of the United Alliance, so he naturally had to pay the price. The Heaven's Origin Palace was going to be destroyed, and so was Tang Xiaoyu. They would not let him off just because he had left the Heaven's Origin Palace. This concerned the dignity of the United Alliance. The person Qin Sang contacted this time was Gu Tianze. Gu Tianze had also come out of the sealed secret realm some time ago and came to the outer realm. He and the left protector seemed to be trying to capture some scarlet genius, but the left protector had been attacked and killed, and Gu Tianze had returned to the Nightmare region. Gu Tianze was more familiar with Tang Xiaoyu, so it was better to leave this matter to him. Gu Tianze, stop Tang Xiaoyu. Qin Sang said directly when she contacted Gu Tianze. I can't stop him. Gu Tianze's tone sounded a little rushed, as if he had just experienced a great battle. HM? Qin Sang was puzzled. The voice transmission talisman could only contact the other party, not see the other party, so it was impossible to know what Gu Tianze was doing. I don't know when Tang Xiaoyu and Grasshopper became so close. Grasshopper took Tang Xiaoyu away. Listening to Gu Tianze's unyielding tone, it seemed that he was still chasing after the two. Grasshopper? Qin Sang was naturally not unfamiliar with this name. Even the entire Union was familiar with the name Grasshopper. Precisely because he was familiar with Grasshopper, he knew that Grasshopper had always been alone. How could he be with Tang Xiaoyu? Gu Tianze, don't be impulsive. If you really can't do it, go back to the base, Qin Sang said. As soon as he said that, Gu Tianze's voice transmission talisman was cut off. Qin Sang frowned. He was also curious about why Grasshopper would help Tang Xiaoyu. Grasshopper wants to interfere with us. Nangong Fengyu, who was beside Qin Sang, also heard the conversation between the two, and her brows furrowed. It's just a grasshopper, Qin Sang said indifferently. In Sun City. Xueqi had already contacted Hierarch Hizhe. City Lord, I discovered the secret between the Everlasting Pavilion and the Nangong family. Can you send someone to help? Tian Xingyi and the others did not expect that Hierarch Hizhe, whom Nangong Fengyu was afraid of, would immediately ask for help. Sure, what kind of person do you want? As soon as Xueqi spoke, Hierarch Hizhe displayed the 10,000 Elephants Origin stacking art, which had already reached the level of the 9 Supremes. Junior brother, I'll leave this matter to you. Tian Xingyi looked at the few people present, as well as the soldiers not far away, and still felt that Kong Xinmu was the best candidate. Kong Xinmu was still thinking about Hierarch Hizhe's message when he heard Tian Xingyi's words. Immediately after, Tian Xingyi, Yu Hongfeng, and the others all took a few steps back. Xueqi said solemnly, Scarlet Genius, then I'll leave this matter to you. Then, Kong Xinmu felt a strange movement in the space around him, and then the environment he was in changed. Scarlet Genius, it's our first time meeting. Please advise me. Hierarch Hizhe had heard of Kong Xinmu, and he had also seen the portrait of Kong Xinmu that the Everlasting Pavilion had put up for arrest. He was just a little surprised to see Kong Xinmu here. Please advise me. Kong Shinmu replied politely. Seeing Hierarchy Zay's appearance, Kong Shinmu was indeed a little surprised. That face could be said to be exactly the same as Cruel's. The only difference was their personalities. Cruel was a person of few words, while Hierarchy Zay looked more amiable and always had a smile on his face. Brother Jiang, follow me. Hierarchy Zay explained the situation to Kong Shinmu as they walked. Like the other mountain sects, the Everlasting Pavilion was also located at the peak of a mountain. However, in the main hall of the Everlasting Pavilion at the peak of the mountain, there was actually a teleportation formation. Chapter 5774. I've already probed, this teleportation array is indeed connected to the Nangong family, but, speaking until here, sect leader Hizay's expression became strange. The Nangong family is not as rumored, they are not in seclusion. When I went, the elders were not there, they seemed to be out traveling. Kong Shinmu was stunned. Sect leader Hizay's probing was to pass through this teleportation array to the Nangong family? Nangong Fengyu doesn't need to say anything. Nangong Yi should be in the Everlasting Pavilion. As for the other elders, I'm not sure. Kong Shinmu thought for a moment and said, Nangong Yi likes to reason with people. He has his own principles when making decisions. You don't need to care about this person. Just as sect leader Hizay said this, a hurried buzzing sound suddenly rang out. Immediately, there were several wind-breaking sounds, followed by a stern voice. Who dares to trespass my Everlasting Pavilion's forbidden area? The person who came was Nangong Yi. Sect leader Hizay did not avoid at all. He turned around and walked out of the hall. Kong Shinmu glanced at the teleportation array on the ground, then followed sect leader Hizay out. A group of disciples wearing the Wuji Pavilion's uniform surrounded the main hall, not letting a single drop of water pass through. The few people in front were the elders of the Everlasting Pavilion. The one standing in the middle was Nangong Yi. When Nangong Yi saw sect leader Hizay, his eyes sunk. Hizay, why are you here? Not long ago, there was news from the Everlasting Pavilion's secret realm, saying that someone had broken into the secret realm. Then they were told that the secret realm was sealed from the inside. The people outside could not enter. As for the elders who were in seclusion inside, they did not know their situation. The most surprising thing was that sect leader Hizay entered the Everlasting Pavilion without anyone noticing. If it wasn't for the huge commotion he caused when he sealed the secret realm, no one would have noticed. Even Nangong Yi and the others only realized that someone had snuck into the Wuji Pavilion when there was a commotion in the secret territory. To be able to easily pass through the Everlasting Pavilion's formation and enter the Everlasting Pavilion without exposing any aura, this person's strength must not be underestimated. After some investigation, Nangong Yi locked onto sect leader Hizay. After a round of investigation, he confirmed that sect leader Hizay had not come out. The pavilion master of the Everlasting Pavilion ordered the surrounding area to be sealed off and the Everlasting Pavilion was inspected. Who would have thought that the one who caused the Everlasting Pavilion's forbidden land to move was actually sect leader Hizay? I relied on my own abilities to get here, Zay said lightly. Hizay, as someone from the upper continent city, you barged into my Everlasting Pavilion's forbidden area without informing us. Nangong Yi's face darkened. Do you know your crime? You also know that I'm from the upper continent city. Our city lord has probably beaten up that Nangong Fengyu of yours, and you're still here asking me if I know my crime? Sect leader He glanced at Nangong Yi, then turned and walked into the secret realm. Nangong Yi was about to speak when he caught a glimpse of Jiang Shenwu. His expression froze. Why are you here as well? Hierarchy Hizay had appeared here because Hizay had mastered the manifestation origin superposition art, which was different from Tianyuan palaces, and had reached the acme of 9 supremes. What about Kong Shinmu? If I said that I was just passing by, would you believe me? Kong Shinmu was right. He was indeed entrusted with an important task without knowing it. Speaking of which, this was his first time coming to the Everlasting Pavilion. In terms of overall strength, the Limitless Pavilion and the Heavenly Yuan Palace were about the same. However, the Nangong clan had a stronger foundation than the Tianyuan Palace. The inherited power of the Nangong family's bloodline was equivalent to a supreme divine power. In other words, any disciple of the Wuji Pavilion who had inherited the bloodline of the Nangong family, even the weakest cultivator, had mastered the equivalent of 2 supreme divine powers. This was why the Everlasting Pavilion was so terrifying. Apart from that, there was also the Union Alliance. Judging from the current situation, the United Alliance was obviously biased toward the Wuji Pavilion. Kong Shinmu did not know what kind of conflicts existed between the Heaven Yuan Palace and the United Alliance. The current situation was just an excuse for the United Alliance to annex the Heavenly Yuan Palace. Nangong-yi took a deep look at Kong Shinmu. Everything that happened to the Wuji Pavilion disciples in the sealed mystic realm was done by you? Nangong-yi's words made Kong Shinmu somewhat confused. As sect leader Hizei had said, Nangong-yi had to follow his own principles before making a decision. Nangong-yi, stop talking nonsense. Take those 2 down quickly. Suddenly, a fierce voice resounded from behind the restricted area, and it exploded through this expanse of the heavens and the earth. It was the pavilion leader of the Wuji Pavilion, Nangong Hongxi. Nangong Hongxi had not arrived at the Wuji Pavilion yet. He was using the Nangong family's telepathic secret technique, a secret technique that could only be inherited by the direct bloodline of the Nangong family. Nangong Hongxi was already infinitely close to the Wuji Pavilion. Although Nangong-yi had his own principles, he unconditionally respected the pavilion leader's orders. Nangong Hongxi gave the order, and Nangong-yi did as he was told. Nangong Hongxi has returned from afar. Aren't you going to welcome him? Hizei glanced at the direction where the voice came from and quickly changed his hand gestures. While Nangong-yi was not paying attention, he activated the formation that had been set up earlier and sent Nangong-yi away. After sealing the mystic realm, Hizei did not stay idle. He used the manifestation origin art of the 9 Supremes realm to set up some formations in the forbidden area of the Wuji Pavilion. The spiritual aura of heaven and earth was vigorous here. Under normal circumstances, the addition of formations would be regarded as a change in the forbidden area. This was also the reason why no one had noticed Hizei at once. After doing all this, Hizei called out to Kong Shinmu and entered the forbidden area again. The person who sent the telepathic message just now was Nangong Hongxi, the pavilion leader of the Wuji Pavilion, Hizei explained to Kong Shinmu. Nangong Hongxi was quite a playboy. He met a woman with the surname Gu when he was wandering outside. They later gave birth to a daughter, Gu Feng. Later, the woman died of illness, and Gu Feng was brought into the Wuji Pavilion. After Hizei's explanation, Kong Shinmu understood Gu Feng's surname and the situation of the Nangong family's bloodline in her body. When both of them entered the forbidden area, Nangong Hongxi returned. Nangong-yi came back with him. Nangong-yi, guard the Wuji Pavilion. I'm going back to the family. Nangong Hongxi's face was extremely gloomy. After a simple explanation, he set off. When Nangong Hongxi entered the forbidden area, Kong Shinmu and Hizei had already activated the transporting formation and successfully teleported away. Nangong Hongxi could not help but frown when he looked at the intact formation on the ground. Based on his understanding of Hizei must have tampered with the transporting formation. What they needed to do now was not to rush to the Nangong family, but to find out where the formation had been tampered with. Chapter 5775. In the swamp, Jiang Shenwu released his soul consciousness and scanned the surroundings. Right now, he could only use his soul consciousness without using his God spirit domain. He could only scan within 100 miles of his surroundings. The sky above the swamp was filled with dense fog. It was because of this fog that his soul consciousness couldn't scan. Moreover, as his soul consciousness spread out, the fog started to move. It was like a series of ever-changing formations, causing the swamp to look exceptionally strange. This is the Nangong family's territory. Hizei seemed to know Kong Shinmu's doubts and said, the Nangong family's ancestors were famous for their formations. Although their descendants' cultivation has mostly stopped using formations, there are still some clansmen who continue to use their ancestors' formations. Everything you see here is basically a formation of the Nangong family. As for who set up the formations, I'm not sure. Currently, there are 3 people who have inherited the Nangong family's ancestors' formations. One is not in the outer realm. The other 2 are in the outer realm. They are called Nangong Feng and Nangong Ing. Hizei had roamed the world for years and knew a lot about the Nangong family. Nangong Feng and Nangong Ing were in the outer realm. However, the outer realm was very big. There weren't just the 4 great sections. There were also hundreds of other sections. There were also hundreds of cities of various sizes. Nangong Feng and Nangong Ing were nowhere to be found. One thing was for sure. The two weren't in the Nangong family. They had left the Nangong family years ago to gain experience. Under normal circumstances, secluded families like the Nangong family would choose places to train in the other realm. Most people in the outer realm knew that the other realm was on the other side of the gate of contracts. From a macro perspective, the other realm was a parallel world that coexisted with the outer realm and the nightmare realm. However, if one wanted to break it down, they would have a new understanding of the other realm. If the other realm was like a sect, there were other planes in the other realm. There were many planes in a parallel world. The division of these planes was very simple. It wasn't that whoever was born in a plane belonged to that plane. Whether they could stay or not depended on their strength. The law of the jungle was the law of survival in the other world. Of course, there were weak and strong people in every plane in the other world. The ancient spirits were the most typical representatives of the lowest planes. The ancient spirits were also the most common contracted beings in the contract gate. The experts of the other world were represented by the 4 great corpse ancestor clans. Kong Shinmu had already obtained the undead spirit flame of the undead spirit clan, one of the 4 great corpse ancestral clans. Moreover, the dead spirit flame he had obtained was the purest dead spirit flame of the dead spirit race. It was because of this that his supreme godly fire mutated and turned into the supreme godly fire. The supreme domain power of the supreme divine flame would only be comprehended after devouring the power left behind in the domain world of ancestor Jiang Shu. As for what kind of world the other world was, those who had been there all said that it was very complicated. Compared to the complexity of the other world, the real problem was how to get to the other world. When it came to heading to the other world, the bipolar mirror had to be mentioned. The bipolar mirror could open a passage between the 2 worlds, allowing one to travel freely. As a magic artifact that could open a passage between the 2 worlds, the bipolar mirror was not the only one. Correspondingly, the bipolar mirror was a must-have for cultivators who were infinitely close to becoming lawmasters. From a certain perspective, the bipolar mirror was a commodity that could be used for trading. There was also the star map lock that had similar attributes to the bipolar mirror. The star map lock was a type of space-type magic artifact. The type of space opened by the star map lock was related to the soul, consciousness, and domain power of the cultivator who owned the star map lock. The stronger these 2 powers were, the more powerful the space opened would be. The essence of the star map lock was a type of space teleportation magic artifact. If the bipolar mirror could open a passage between the 2 worlds, the star map lock would be the passage that connected the 2 worlds. However, compared to the simplicity of the bipolar mirror, the usage of the star map lock was more complicated. This was also why, in the sealed secret realm, many cultivators preferred the star map lock over fighting for the fragment of the 7 devouring demon sealing art. Of course, the core of the star map lock, which was also the seal, should not be forgotten. For a family like the Nangong family with enough resources, they definitely had a lot of bipolar mirrors. Therefore, it was not difficult for them to go to the other world. Nangong Feng and Nangong Ing had returned from the other world 100 years ago. Although they did not return to the Nangong family or the Wuji Pavilion, they had always been in the outer realm. According to what Headmaster He Zhe knew, Nangong Feng and Nangong Ing were still in the outer realm. Moreover, the village they were in was not far from the passage to the nightmare region. Headmaster He Zhe told Kong Shinmu about these things. After hearing where Nangong Feng and Nangong Ing were, Kong Shinmu's heart sank. They're not far from the nightmare region? Back at Heavenly Yuan Palace, Tian Xing had mentioned that Tang Xiaoyu's Tang village was in the nightmare region. That's right. He Zhe nodded. You're worried about Tang Xiaoyu, right? Don't worry, I'll keep an eye on him. Kong Shinmu heaved a sigh of relief. The 2 of them looked at the swamp. There were a total of 10 small arrays where they were standing. The foundations of the 10 formations were different, but they all used spatial barriers as a medium. This is where the Nangong family is. Brother Jiang, I'll leave the task of breaking the formations to you. I'll go borrow someone. As soon as Sect Master He Zhe finished speaking, his figure disappeared from the spot. When he disappeared, Kong Shinmu's soul didn't sense anything. If he hadn't activated his God Spirit domain, he wouldn't have sensed Headmaster He Zhe's aura. In the perception of the God Spirit domain, Sect leader Hizei shuttled through space as he pleased, as if he was in an ordinary place, not leaving any traces. None of the formations in front of him, including the spatial barriers, could stop Headmaster Hizei. Headmaster Hizei moved through the formations as if they were flat ground. Soon, he disappeared into the boundary not far away. Kong Shinmu was a little surprised. He could basically sense Headmaster Hizei's cultivation. The aura he released was still a supreme god's power. To be able to do this, it meant that his supreme god's domain had reached the 9th level. He might even have comprehended his own domain power. His supreme god's power had probably reached the 9th level long ago, infinitely close to the realm of laws. Who goes there? In the next moment, a loud and clear rebuke resounded across the horizon. Following that, all the formations in the swamp were activated one by one. This scene stunned Kong Shinmu. Chapter 5776. The Nangong family knew a thing or two about the situation in the outer domain, so they made some changes to the formation at the entrance. However, because Nangong Feng and Nangong Ying did not return, the family only made some changes to the formation and did not install a new one. At this time, seeing sect leader Hizei barge in was not surprising. Although the Nangong family announced to the outside world that they were in seclusion, they had never really cut off contact with the outer domain. From the formation in the forbidden area of Everlasting Pavilion, it could be seen that the Nangong family frequently interacted with Everlasting Pavilion. This was also reasonable. The leader of Everlasting Pavilion was a member of the Nangong family, which also proved that the two coexisted. The Nangong family naturally knew the current situation of Everlasting Pavilion. Therefore, all the elders of the Nangong family, who were in closed-door cultivation, came out one after another. Apart from a few elders and disciples who were out training and could not return in a short period of time, the other disciples were already prepared to face the enemy. Sect leader Hizei's intrusion caused the entire Nangong family to be on guard. Kong Shinmu glanced at the direction sect leader Hizei left in and found that the formation he had broken through had already changed. This also proved that the formation on this side was constantly changing its form. Kong Shinmu did not know what sect leader Hizei meant by borrowing a person. He looked at the formation in front of him and did not understand why sect leader Hizei wanted him to break the formation. He was talking about the heavy responsibility of breaking the formation. These formations looked unpredictable, the formation foundations were complex, and they were all position-type formations. Together with the space barrier, it was indeed very complicated. However, it was not an exaggeration to say that as long as a Supreme Cultivator Supreme God Force reached level 9, even if they did not know anything about formations, they could completely destroy a certain formation with their own strength. Cultivators in the realm of Supreme Divine Power level 9 could control the domain power corresponding to Supreme Divine Power, and could also break through some space barriers. Even if they could not completely break the space barrier, they would not be trapped in it. Jiang Shenwu's Supreme Spiritual Flame had already reached the 9th level. Coupled with the fact that he had comprehended the power of the spiritual domain not too long ago, he had also grasped the supreme power of space. In his eyes, the array in front of him could not obstruct him at all. Although Kong Shinmu didn't understand the deeper meaning behind Sect Master Hizei's words, he also set off. When they stepped into the swamp, they would be considered to have stepped into the formation. The formations were activated one after another. Very quickly, the Nangong family's disciples discovered Kong Shinmu's existence. Before these people arrived, Kong Shinmu already felt strong auras of supreme divine powers and all sorts of supreme martial techniques. Needless to say, the Nangong family's bloodline inheritance's replication power was indeed terrifying. It could replicate any kind of power, and the strength of the replicated power was not inferior to the strength of the replicated power. Even though these forces were very strong, Kong Shinmu was no longer the same as before. Not only had his supreme divine spiritual flame reached the 9th level, but he had also mastered the divine spiritual domain. Kong Shinmu sensed the incoming forces and the array formation in front of him. Without hesitation, he released his God's spiritual domain. The moment the God's spiritual domain was released, he sensed all the formation foundations, including the formation's operation path. Everything was under Kong Shinmu's control. This was the first time Kong Shinmu truly released his God's spiritual domain after Kong Shinmu mastered it. The moment the God's spiritual domain spread, the sky above the swamp was instantly filled with a red aura. Immediately after, a scorching heat suddenly swept across, burning the swamp that was covered by the divine realm to ashes. Kong Shinmu saw a passage. His soul consciousness sensed that there was another world at the end of the passage. There was also an unknown power in formation. He guessed that the Nangong family's residence was at the end of the passage. Kong Shinmu retracted his god's spiritual domain and entered the passage. His soul consciousness sensed that the passage was very long, but after Kong Shinmu entered, he found that the passage was very short. Soon, he reached the end of the passage. Just as his soul consciousness sensed, there was another world at the end of the passage. It was a brand new world. The first thing that entered his eyes was a tall and majestic palace. The palace was surrounded by clouds and mist, and it looked like a fairyland. After coming to this place from the swamp, there was a cliff road. At that moment, Kong Shinmu was at the edge of the cliff. The tall palace that stood in the clouds and mist was separated from him by a deep abyss. Above the abyss, there was also smoke curling up, and it covered the scene at the bottom of the abyss. This smoke was actually a type of supreme god power, and it obstructed the true appearance of the abyss. Not only was the smoke floating above the abyss a type of supreme god power, but even the surroundings of the cliff and the fog surrounding the palace were also supreme god power. Moreover, this supreme god power was not a single supreme god power. There were several types of supreme god power mixed in. Most importantly, Kong Shinmu's devouring power could not devour this supreme god power at will. A portion of the devouring power that he released was instead devoured by the supreme god power. Kong Shinmu could clearly sense that the portion of the devouring power that he released was cut off by the supreme god power. From this, it could be concluded that this supreme god power was not the power of nature of the supreme god power, but the supreme god power that was mastered by the cultivator. Just what kind of cultivator could release his supreme divine power at will and exist in this place? The most frightening thing was that there was not only one or two types of supreme god power floating here, but there were several types of supreme god power. This was only the supreme god power that Kong Shinmu could roughly sense. There was a distance from the palace, and Kong Shinmu could not clearly sense how many types of supreme god power there were around the palace. Kong Shinmu focused and prepared to cross the abyss. Just as he took a step forward, he felt a gust of cold air coming from the bottom of the abyss. This cold air came very suddenly, and it disappeared just as suddenly. Kong Shinmu gathered his supreme soul power, passed through the supreme god power floating above the abyss, and fell into the abyss. Soon, he sensed the situation at the bottom of the abyss. The bottom of the abyss was just the bottom of an ordinary cliff, and there was a river at the bottom of the cliff. The strange thing was this river. This river had no source, and there was no end to it. It just suddenly appeared at the bottom of the cliff. Kong Shinmu released the supreme space power, and used it to go directly to the bottom of the abyss. He observed the river at the bottom of the abyss at a close distance, and the river was indeed a river. However, there seemed to be some kind of supreme god power of nature hidden in the river. Kong Shinmu's first reaction was to think of the supreme water power of nature. However, he quickly sensed the situation in the river, and there was no aura of the supreme water power. The cold in the river meant that the supreme god power of nature hidden in the river was very close to the water or ice attribute. However, Kong Shinmu was very sure that there was no supreme water power of nature, or supreme ice power of nature. Chapter 5777. The supreme god power here was mostly the power of supreme cultivators, while the supreme holy ice power was a single-element supreme god power. This meant that up until now, there were no supreme cultivators who possessed the supreme holy ice power. In that case, the supreme holy ice power would now exist in the natural world as the power of nature. Since that was the case, it was unlikely that the supreme holy ice power's power of nature existed here. However, the aura of the supreme god power emanating from the river was extremely familiar to Kong Shinmu. Not only that, but Kong Shinmu also sensed that the supreme holy ice domain that was hidden in his mind, consciousness, and sea of consciousness was moving strangely. With that thought, Kong Shinmu jumped into the river. The supreme god power of nature in the river suddenly swept over and gathered towards Kong Shinmu. It was the supreme holy ice power's power of nature. The entire river was the supreme holy ice power's power of nature. Kong Shinmu was in the river, and he was surrounded by the supreme holy ice power's power of nature. The supreme holy ice domain that had existed in his mind, consciousness, and Sea of Consciousness for a long time also started to churn. Soon, the Supreme Holy Ice Domain's power of nature spread out and covered the entire river. The Supreme Holy Ice Power's power of nature was affected by the Supreme Holy Ice Domain's power, and it started to churn rapidly. It had always been thought that every Supreme Cultivator would be able to comprehend the Supreme Holy Ice Domain's power of nature after they grasped Supreme God power and reached a certain realm. Under normal circumstances, Supreme Cultivators would first grasp Supreme God power, and then comprehend the Supreme Holy Ice Power's power of nature. For example, Kong Shinmu had long obtained the Supreme Holy Ice Domain's power of nature. There was no precedent for him to see the Supreme Holy Ice Power of nature's power of nature. Kong Shinmu was the first person to first possess the Supreme Holy Ice Domain's power of nature, before coming into contact with the Supreme Holy Ice Power of nature's power of nature. At that moment, Kong Shinmu did not know how to contain the boundless Supreme Holy Ice Power of nature's power of nature's power of nature. After being enveloped by the Supreme Holy Ice Domain's power, the Supreme Holy Ice's power in the river resonated with the power of nature and started to surge. The devouring power swept out and began to devour the power of the Supreme Holy Ice. In a few seconds, all the Supreme Holy Ice power in the river had been devoured, and the river disappeared. It turned out that this river was formed from the Supreme Holy Ice's nature energy. Now that the Supreme Holy Ice's nature energy was devoured, the river disappeared. The power of the Supreme Sacred Ice Domain quickly returned to his Sea of Consciousness. The power of the Supreme Holy Ice that was devoured by the devouring power did not enter his mind and Sea of Consciousness. Instead, it entered his meridians and gathered together. Thus, Kong Shinmu began to activate his cultivation technique. The moment he activated his cultivation technique, the power of nature of the Supreme Holy Ice in his Chi meridian also started to circulate. After that, Kong Shinmu comprehended the refining process. This process did not last too long, and Kong Shinmu was forced to stop his comprehension. It did not mean that he could casually comprehend the power of nature of the Supreme Holy Ice just because he had the Supreme Sacred Ice Domain's power. On the contrary, Kong Shinmu already had the Supreme Sacred Ice Domain's power, and he had a certain level of understanding of it. However, he was still unable to comprehend the power of nature of the Supreme Holy Ice's power in a short period of time. However, there was one thing that surprised him. The power of nature of the Supreme Holy Ice's power had been circulating in his meridians, and it did not have any intention of entering his mind and consciousness. Furthermore, it could not be absorbed by the extreme 10 Devil Seal. Although the power of nature of the Supreme Holy Ice's power remained in such a state, it did not seem to hinder him from using other supreme powers. Kong Shinmu did not care about it for the time being. The entire river at the bottom of this abyss was filled with the power of nature of the Supreme Holy Ice. After Kong Shinmu absorbed it, the river disappeared, and its original appearance was revealed. It was still a river. However, this river was normal water. From time to time, some living creatures would float across the river. Kong Shinmu followed the river for a distance, and only left when he realized that there was no longer any power of nature of the Supreme Holy Ice's power in the river. Although he had just devoured a large amount of the power of nature of the Supreme Holy Ice's power, it was not all of the power of nature in the natural world. According to the power of nature of the Supreme Holy Ice's power circulating in his meridians, Kong Shinmu roughly determined that the power of nature of the Supreme Holy Ice's power that he had devoured was just the tip of the iceberg in the natural world. After releasing his consciousness to check again, and confirming that there were no abnormalities, Kong Shinmu flew away. Before leaving, Kong Shinmu sensed that the source of the river was a huge forest. There were many paths in the forest, and there were also the auras of some unfamiliar living creatures. This was a place that his soul lock had not detected previously. At this moment, after devouring all the power of nature of the Supreme Holy Ice's power, he sensed the source of the river. From here, he could see that the source of the river was in the direction of the Nangong family. Correspondingly, he could also detect the end of the river. At the end of the river, Kong Shinmu's soul lock's detection was not very obvious. However, combined with the power of the Supreme Soul, he could detect the end of the river. It was a swamp. Not only that, with the power of the Supreme Soul, Kong Shinmu's soul lock could ignore the surrounding formation and directly detect the true appearance of the surrounding terrain. Previously, he had relied on the power of the Supreme Soul to barely fight with Wan Zong. At this moment, The power of the Supreme Soul actually ignored the enhancement of the formation and boundary. Kong Shinmu was curious about the power of the Supreme Soul. Originally, he had devoured the power of the Supreme Soul from the Fu Shui tribe's elder. All along, Kong Shinmu had treated this power as an ordinary power of the Supreme Soul. If he had to say that it was different from other power of the Supreme Soul, it would be a power that could affect one's soul lock. In other words, it was a spiritual power. As his cultivation base improved and his experience deepened, the power of the Supreme Soul displayed started to change Kong Shinmu's view of it. Perhaps he did not understand what kind of power the power of the Supreme Soul was from the beginning. Coupled with the limitations of his own power, the power of the Supreme Soul was limited to the extent of his own power. After withdrawing the power of the Supreme Soul, Kong Shinmu realized that even though his soul lock was very strong, he could not clearly detect the end of the river. Kong Shinmu adjusted his power. Just as he was about to fly above the abyss, he was suddenly stopped by a bolt of lightning. A thick bolt of lightning suddenly fell from above the abyss and headed straight for Kong Shinmu. Chapter 5778. The lightning struck the side of the river and created a deep pit, splashing water everywhere. However, the lightning did not disappear. Instead, it changed its direction and attacked Kong Shinmu again. The gray lightning, which was 10 feet thick, locked onto Kong Shinmu and came at him ferociously. At first, Kong Shinmu was still dodging the lightning attack. As time passed, Kong Shinmu realized that the lightning was actually a formation. As long as the formation base was not broken, the formation would continue to exist, and the lightning would also continue to exist. Moreover, Kong Shinmu realized that the lightning would continue to grow stronger as the formation operated. In other words, if he did not break the formation in a short time, the lightning would only become stronger as time passed. However, when Kong Shinmu devoted himself to breaking the formation, he realized that it was not as easy to break as it seemed on the surface. This was a position-type formation, and it was a formation that was a combination of multiple formations. This made Kong Shinmu think of the position-type formation that existed in Gufeng's bloodstain. This must be the formation of the Nangong family. After understanding more, Kong Shinmu also realized that this formation hid the power of a domain. From this, it could be concluded that this formation was set up by an expert who had mastered the power of a domain. The power of the domain in the formation was a kind of sword energy domain. This also meant that the cultivator who set up the formation was a cultivator who had mastered the power of a sword energy domain. After understanding the existence of the sword energy domain in the formation, Kong Shinmu made a new discovery. The 10 feet thick lightning was not the power of lightning. Instead, it was the power condensed by several rays of sword energy. The entire lightning was the power condensed by sword energy. The lightning that appeared on the surface was all the manifestation of the sword chi. Even though this was a formation, its essence was still the power of a domain. Against the power of a domain, one would naturally need to use the power of a domain. Kong Shinmu did not hesitate to release the power of the divine domain. In an instant, the bottom of the abyss was filled with darkness. As far as the eye could see, there was only darkness. This was one of the visual forms of Kong Shinmu's divine territory. Although it was dark everywhere, Kong Shinmu could clearly see anything within the range of the divine territory. The essence of this divine spirit domain was the supreme divine spirit flame. Although it appeared to be completely dark, there were also fragments of flame power burning within it. In other words, it was a mysterious flame power that spread throughout the entire divine realm. That bolt of lightning was now surrounded by the power of the black flames and trapped in the divine spirit domain. That wasn't all. Immediately after, the flame of the undead was released and engulfed the lightning. The lightning that was engulfed by the flame of the dead spirits instantly released the sword chi domain. For a time, sword chi burst forth and illuminated the dark divine domain. The divine spirit domain suddenly changed from black to white. When it changed, the flame of the dead spirit surged continuously where the black and white colors intersected. It engulfed all the sword chi that erupted from the lightning. The sword chi was shaking violently, trying to break free from the flame of the dead spirit's restraint. However, the flame of the dead spirits emitted waves of scorching heat as it attempted to refine the sword chi that surged out. The thunderbolt formation was activated along with the surging of the sword chi. Perhaps because it could not break free from the divine spirit domain, The formation hidden in the lightning activated a position-type formation on the spot. For a time, the Divine Spirit domain, which was a combination of black and white, was divided. The moment the position-type formation was unleashed, it was first divided into 2, then into 4, and so on and so forth. Kong Shin Mu could not stop the position-type formation from dividing the Divine Spirit domain for a while. However, as the Divine Spirit domain was divided, Kong Shin Mu also realized the essence of the position-type formation. It treated the Divine Spirit domain as a kind of space and divided it repeatedly before finally forming a position-type formation. From a certain point of view, this formation was also equivalent to a space-type sorcery. Kong Shin Mu was very familiar with anything related to space-type secret sorcery. Without hesitation, he released the supreme power of space. With the help of the supreme power of space, Kong Shin Mu found the base of the position-type formation in the lightning. Without any hesitation, he quickly retracted the Divine Spirit domain. As the range of the Divine Spirit domain decreased, the position-type formation in the lightning stopped dividing and released the Sword Chi domain. Initially, there were only a few Sword Chi released. However, as the position-type formation continued to divide the space, the number of Sword Chi released increased exponentially. Moreover, the power of the Sword Chi kept increasing. In less than a breath's time, countless Sword Chi formed a giant sword. Kong Shin Mu recognized this sword. It was the Xianming Thunder Sword. The Xianming Thunder Sword was a sacred item that was comparable to the Great Devil Seal of 10 Directions. Kong Shin Mu didn't expect to encounter the Xianming Thunder Sword at this time. Although the Xianming Thunder Sword in front of him was just a shadow formed by countless Sword Chi in the formation, it didn't reduce the deterrence of the Xianming Thunder Sword at all. Kong Shin Mu couldn't help but sigh. The Xianming Thunder Sword, which had been missing for a long time, was actually in the Nangong family outside the domain. He also knew very well that it wasn't the time to sigh about the power of the Xianming Thunder Sword. What he needed to do now was to break the power of the Xianming Thunder Sword's Sword Chi domain. Originally, Kong Shin Mu planned to break the position-type formation's base directly. However, Kong Shin Mu changed his mind. He wanted to change the base of the formation and integrate his domain power into it so that he could use the formation that condensed the Xianming Thunder Sword's Sword Chi domain power. With that thought in mind, Kong Shin Mu did it. Kong Shin Mu covered the entire Divine Spirit domain with the Supreme Space Power. He used the special space of the Supreme Space Power and the domain power of the Divine Spirit domain to break the formation. After a round of fighting, Kong Shin Mu experienced the power of the Xianming Thunder Sword. Although it was just a sword energy shadow, it could still cut the space formed by the Supreme Space Power. Not long after, the space formed by Kong Shin Mu's Supreme Space Power was directly broken by the Xianming Thunder Sword's sword energy shadow. The Xianming Thunder Sword's sword energy shadow only cut the space formed by the Supreme Space Power, but it didn't pose any threat to the Divine Spirit domain. This was enough to prove that the power of Kong Shin Mu's Divine Spirit domain was enough to compete with the sword energy domain. Kong Shin Mu focused again and activated the 9 seals of the Great Devil Seal of 10 Directions. Since the Xianming Thunder Sword was also a sacred item, he would use a sacred item to deal with a sacred item. The 9 seals of the Great Devil Seal of 10 Directions were all activated in an instant. The power of one of the seals rushed towards the shadow of the Xianming Thunder Sword. The shadow of the Xianming Thunder Sword was just a shadow formed by the many sword energies in the Sword Chi domain. As long as the formation wasn't destroyed, the sword energies would still exist. Just like now, although the formed Xianming Thunder Sword was suppressed by one of the seals of the Great Devil Seal of 10 Directions. However, a new shadow of the Xianming Thunder Sword was forming. Chapter 5779. It turned out that the Supreme Spatial Force could only limit the division of the formation, but it could not break the formation from its roots. Kong Shin Mu simply retracted the Supreme Spatial Force. He focused and released the power of the Supreme Soul. The moment the power of the Supreme Soul was released, the division of the formation suddenly stopped. Kong Shin Mu was pleasantly surprised. Taking advantage of this opportunity, he forcefully stopped the division of the formation and swallowed the Sword Chi domain. When the power of the Supreme Soul was released, it was mixed with the consciousness of the soul. The power of the Supreme Sacred Ice domain had always existed in the sea of consciousness of the soul. At this moment, it was also released at the same time, and condensed in the foundation of the formation along with the power of the Supreme Soul. When changing the foundation of the formation, Kong Shinmu keenly discovered an unfamiliar power. It was the power of nature of the Supreme Sacred Ice. After this power was swallowed, it had always existed in the Qi meridian, constantly circulating in an irregular manner. At this moment, this power completely surged into the foundation of the formation. When the foundation of the formation was changed, the power of nature of the Supreme Sacred Ice was finally no longer stagnant in the Qi meridian, but remained in the foundation of the formation. In the end, the formation took the form of the Xianming Thunder Sword, which was the size of a palm. Generally speaking, formations existed in a virtual form. Only when a cultivator set up a formation according to certain steps during a battle would the formation appear in the form it should have. However, the formation was different from other formations. Most of them would be attached to a Dharma artifact to release them. In essence, they could be considered a type of Dharma artifact. When the formation was refined to the Great Success stage, it would exist in a physical form. For example, the formation that Kong Shinmu had put away at this moment was a kind of formation that was attached to the Xianming Thunder Sword, so it was in the form of the Xianming Thunder Sword. For this kind of formation, as long as the foundation of the formation was changed, one could obtain the right to use it. Now that Kong Shinmu had changed the foundation of the formation, he became the new owner of the Xianming Thunder Sword formation. After putting away the formation, Kong Shinmu was about to leave. As soon as he took a step forward, he discovered that his surroundings had changed greatly. He was originally at the bottom of the abyss, but now there was only a river around him, and there were no cliffs on either side. Not far ahead was the forest that he had sensed earlier. The abyss disappeared? Kong Shinmu looked around and suddenly thought of a possibility. The abyss that he saw just now was actually the Xianming Thunder Sword Formation Array Formation. Now that the Xianming Thunder Sword's array formation had been broken, the abyss would naturally disappear. Kong Shinmu had just moved a short distance when he was stopped by several figures standing in front of him. These people looked to be in their 30s or 40s. They all wore the same uniform and each of them held a 3-foot-long sword in their hands. It wasn't hard to tell that they were members of the Nangong family. Moreover, from the looks of it, these people had been waiting for a long time. When they saw Kong Shinmu appear here, apart from anger, there was also surprise on their faces. "Who are you?" His berating voice was filled with anger. While he was questioning Kong Shinmu, he carefully glanced behind Kong Shinmu. "I'm looking for someone." Kong Shinmu thought for a while and said, "Speaking of which, it was strange. He had clearly followed He-Zhe into the swamp, but he didn't see He-Zhe at all along the way. He-Zhe had said something about breaking the array formation and then going to borrow someone. Although the breaking array formation was this Xianming Thunder Sword Formation Array Formation. As for borrowing someone, looking at the current situation, He-Zhe probably didn't manage to borrow anyone. Kong Shinmu still couldn't figure out who He-Zhe wanted to borrow and why the person was in the Nangong family. He seems to be the Kong Shinmu that second elder mentioned. Didn't they say that Kong Shinmu couldn't break through the array formation? From the looks of it, even the Xianming Thunder Sword Formation Array Formation seems to have been broken. Even so, look at his appearance. He really looks very similar to that outsider called Kong Shinmu. These disciples were just ordinary members of the Nangong family. Naturally, they had never seen Kong Shinmu before. They had only heard about Kong Shinmu from a few elders. Looking at the person in front of them now, they couldn't be sure if this person was Kong Shinmu. "Did you see a person?" Kong Shinmu roughly described He-Zhe's appearance. The disciples present shook their heads one by one. They didn't take this matter to heart. They just thought that it was just a pretense that Kong Shinmu used to muddle through, so they directly attacked Kong Shinmu. Although these Nangong family disciples were all around the 6th level of Supreme Divine Power cultivators, none of them were weak. In addition, the Nangong family's bloodline inheritance was rather special. It was equivalent to each of them having 2 types of Supreme Divine Power. Not only that, but the power of the Supreme Divine Power would also increase exponentially. It was undeniable that these Nangong family disciples in front of them were indeed very strong. However, compared to Kong Shinmu, they were still too weak. Kong Shinmu only needed 1 strike to defeat all these Nangong family disciples. Then, he dashed forward. At the same time, in the Nangong family, He-Zhe quietly arrived at the Nangong family. Basically, None of the Nangong family disciples noticed Hizei's arrival. Only a few of them saw Hizei with their own eyes. They realized that Hizei's clothes were different from theirs, so they became suspicious. In an instant, the entire Nangong family became vigilant. Hizei's 10,000 Elephants Origin Superposition Technique's 9 Supremes realm had reached the point where he could freely shuttle through space without being easily detected. People at the same level of cultivation as Hizei might not be able to detect Hizei's 10 Supremes realm. Hizei's supreme divine power was related to space techniques. It was the supreme shape-shifting power. The supreme shape-shifting power, as the name suggested, was a kind of power that could transform. The supreme shape-shifting power of the 10 Supremes realm could freely shuttle through space. Coupled with his 9th-level supreme shape-shifting power, he could erase the traces left behind after shuttling through space, and thus reach the point where he could come and go without a trace. The premise was that Hizei's opponent's cultivation base was below the 9th level, or at the 9th level. Of course, there were some 9th-level Supreme Realm cultivators who could use their own outstanding domain power to restrain Hizei's 10 Supremes realm 10 Supremes realm 10 Supremes realm. Hizei did not pay attention to the Nangong family disciples. Although he was discovered, he did not plan to stay for long. After strolling around the library, he had a general understanding of the Nangong family's terrain. Hizei directly went to the southern suburbs of the Nangong family. There was a courtyard that occupied an area like a mountain. Hizei came to the courtyard's entrance as if there was no one else around. He did not knock on the door and directly rushed in. However, Hizei, who had come here without any obstacles, quickly ran into a wall. The seemingly simple wooden door was actually attached with the Xianming Thundersword's array formation. Hizei really did not expect this. What he was least good at was passing through the Xianming Thundersword's array formation. The Xianming Thundersword was a heaven and earth saint item. The array formation set up by it would form a sword chi domain, thus dividing space. Even if his 10,000 Elephants Origin Superposition Technique had reached the 9 Supremes realm, he could not barge in rashly. Chapter 5780. The people in the courtyard had already sensed Hizei's forceful entrance. "Who is it?" The voice that came from the house was very young. "It's your elder brother." Hizei circled to the side of the courtyard. There was no Xianming Thundersword formation here, so he used the 10,000 Elephants Origin Superposition Technique without hesitation and entered the courtyard. Coincidentally, the person in the house walked out. It was a teenager who looked to be in his teens. "Nangong Yueni, come with me." Hizei grabbed the teenager's arm and led him away. "Who are you? Where are you taking me?" Nangong Yueni did not know Hizei. Just as he was feeling puzzled, he saw the second elder arrive. "Second elder, do you know him?" Nangong Yueni asked doubtfully. "Venerable, he is a thief who trespassed into the Nangong family. Please help us take him down." The second elder of the Nangong family said respectfully. "Oh." Nangong Yueni looked at Hizei doubtfully. His slightly raised eyebrows seemed to be asking Hizei for confirmation. How could Hizei admit that he was a thief who trespassed into the Nangong family? He immediately denied it. "Yueni, don't listen to his nonsense. He is old and has a bad memory. He might have mistaken me for someone else." The second elder's eyes widened when he heard Hizei's words, and he looked at him in disbelief. He never expected Hizei to be so thick-skinned as to lie through his teeth. Nangong Yueni felt that Hizei's words made sense, and he could not help but ponder them. "Yueni, come with me." Hizei hurried over and carried Nangong Yueni. He used the 10,000 Elephants Origin Superposition Technique of the 9 Supremes and left the courtyard in the blink of an eye. Everything happened too suddenly. By the time the second elder reacted, Hizei and Nangong Yueni had already disappeared. "Someone!" The second elder shouted and hurriedly chased after them. The moment he chased after them, he ran into the fifth elder and seventh elder. The moment they saw the second elder's expression, they knew what had happened. Not daring to delay, they quickly sealed off the entire Nangong family. Nangong Yueni's original body was the lifeline of the Nangong family's bloodline. 10,000 years ago, he had first developed intelligence. Over the next several thousand years, he had absorbed the essence of the world and transformed into a human, which was how he looked now. However, Nangong Yueni had been cultivating here ever since he had taken on a human form. He had never left the Nangong clan and rarely interacted with the other clansmen. He would never judge others and would always seek confirmation for himself. He knew Nangong Yueni because he had accidentally snuck into the Nangong family. However, he didn't enter the Nangong family through the teleportation formation, so it could be considered an opportunity. It was his first time coming into contact with the bipolar mirror. When the bipolar mirror was activated, he fell into the Nangong family. After returning, the bipolar mirror was also damaged and was still under repair. As the lifeline of the Nangong family, Nangong Yueni held absolute power. The conflict between the Limitless Pavilion and the Heavenly Origin Palace had long been premeditated by the United Alliance. This time, they were just using it as a pretext. It was reasonable for the Nangong family to intervene in the Everlasting Pavilion's matter. Even if the United Alliance helped the Limitless Pavilion, the Heavenly Origin Palace could accept it. After all, the United Alliance's base was in the Pinnacle region. Although the passageway from the Pinnacle region to the Outer Realm was open for a long time, the number of cultivators who could pass through each time was limited. The Pinnacle Region United Alliance could not send a large number of people in such a short period of time. Once Nangong Yueni joined the battle, the war would be over. He was well aware of this, so he was determined to send Nangong Yueni out of the Nangong family. As soon as Kong Shinmu arrived at the foot of the Nangong family's mountain, he heard the sirens of the Nangong family. He concluded that He had caused a commotion and hurried into the Nangong family's territory. However, he didn't expect that the Nangong family's mountain gate was protected by the Xianming lightning sword formation, so he couldn't force his way in. Not only that, but he also attracted the attention of the Nangong family. Coincidentally, the third elder came over. In order to stop He and Nangong Yueni, he released his supreme divine power without even looking. The supreme divine power that the third elder of the Nangong family possessed was the supreme shadow force, and he cultivated in the direction of binding. Combined with the inherited power of the Nangong family's bloodline, he could form a spatial prison. Once trapped in this kind of spatial prison, even He would have to spend a lot of effort to break out of it. The moment Kong Shinmu sensed the aura of his opponent's supreme divine power, he dodged it. The third elder was well aware of He's movement technique. He was famous for the 9 Supremes' 1,000 Elephants origin art. If he wanted to avoid the spatial prison, he would have to use the 1,000 Elephants origin art. Thus, the third elder had already set up a trap when he used his supreme divine power. If He used the 1,000 Elephants origin art, he would be trapped in the spatial prison. However, the third elder never expected this. He didn't expect that the intruder would use the simplest movement technique to avoid his supreme divine power. When he took a closer look, he saw that the person who appeared at the mountain gate wasn't He, but an unfamiliar young man. Looking at him and sensing his aura, the third elder quickly recognized Kong Shinmu's identity. The Scarlet Genius, Kong Shinmu. After Kong Shinmu's name became famous in the Everlasting Pavilion, it gradually spread in the Nangong family as well. The Nangong family could hear about some of Kong Shinmu's deeds in the sealed mystic realm at any time. The person in question, Kong Shinmu, did not know about these rumors. Hearing the word Scarlet Genius from the Nangong family's elder, Kong Shinmu's expression was a little strange. Hand him over. The Nangong family's third elder thought that it was Kong Shinmu who had come to He's aid, so he shouted. When Kong Shinmu heard this, he concluded that He had borrowed the person. Aren't they not out yet? Kong Shinmu suddenly changed the topic and asked. Don't play dumb. Aren't you here to help him? You are still here, so of course they haven't come out yet. The third elder's face was gloomy. Who is the person he is borrowing? Kong Shinmu looked at the Nangong family situation. Not only was the third elder tense, but the other disciples were also extremely cautious. When the third elder heard Kong Shinmu's words, he thought that Kong Shinmu was provoking the Nangong family. Without saying anything, he immediately attacked. Kong Shinmu's soul consciousness had already locked onto the third elder. At this moment, when the third elder attacked, he used his fastest speed to dodge the third elder's supreme divine power attack. Kong Shinmu was not unfamiliar with the supreme shadow power. However, the third elder's supreme shadow power in front of him clearly leaned towards the binding attribute. Combined with the Nangong family's replication power, it could directly form a spatial prison. As for Kong Shin-mu, he was also afraid of the spatial prison. After all, he had not cultivated the supreme space power to the great perfection realm, and his understanding of space wasn't very clear. If he was trapped inside, he could get lost in the spatial prison. Moreover, he couldn't blindly use spatial magic to deal with this kind of spatial prison. If he made any mistakes, he would fall into the spatial prison. You're tuning in to the Xueqi's Martial Arts Saga YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.